American Comics. My Warhammer Simulator by author C. Fu Na Go Chapter 1026-1055. Invasion of the Gods Part 12. At this moment, deep within Slaanesha's domain, where purple and even pink desires permeated the air, countless visible, vortex-like terrifying recoil forces were causing a large number of incredibly magnificent ancient palaces to continuously collapse and fall. Rumble. Looking out, more than half of Demon Prince Fulgrim's massive serpentine body was forcibly vibrated into a large amount of dissipating psychic dust by Annihilation Bringer's passive counterattack. Even the purple scimitars, which were always tightly held between his four stout arms, only had two remaining intact. However, the continuous blessings from Slaanesh were rapidly mending Demon Prince Fulgrim's horrific injuries. It also allowed him to quickly move around the periphery of the battlefield, seizing the opportunity to launch another attack. At the same time, every inch of Luo Sha's vibranium outer shell was covered in sticky, crimson blood. With every trickle of sticky blood squirming and flowing, Luo Sha had already entered the warp liberation state, unrivaled in close combat. The blood scythe, tightly gripped in his hands, repeatedly hacked at Annihilation Bringer's slender body like a torrential storm. But each time the green glowing sharp blade embedded halfway, a vortex-like recoil force, which even a Gene Seed Primarch's physical strength could not suppress, would forcefully send the blood scythe flying outwards, forcing Luo Sha's entire massive body to retreat. Boom, boom, boom. Regent Guilliman, whose massive body was strenuously maneuvering the armor of fate and who was moving and leaping repeatedly across the purple ground, occasionally raised his other large hand, which bore the gauntlet of the Regent. He fired special bolter rounds of considerable caliber at Annihilation Bringer's seemingly ethereal eyes, which had remained motionless. Regent Guilliman did not expect these bolter rounds to inflict much damage on the opponent. Instead, he was using the explosive flashes generated by each bolter round's detonation to obscure any potential sensory abilities Annihilation Bringer might possess, thereby creating more opportunities for the other Primarch brothers' attacks. Buzz, buzz, buzz. At this moment, as Perturabo, whose entire body was as massive as a metal mountain, quickly assembled large-caliber artillery pieces, the metal shells immediately fired also successfully dispersed a large amount of extremis above Annihilation Bringer's head. Countless terrifying metal torrents, which instantly transformed into a black mist, then madly swept towards Annihilation Bringer, who was close at hand. Thus, even if Annihilation Bringer's recoil force was almost unmatched, these dense and incredibly complex moving terrifying metal torrents were able to genuinely harm Annihilation Bringer. They even caused the gods, emissary within everyone's field of vision, to repeatedly vibrate and shake its entire slender body, attempting to escape the engulfment of the large amount of extremis. Guilliman, Luo Sha, I suspect this damned fellow's true source of power is beneath the ground. Because even if it sustained considerable damage, it has no intention of moving its feet. At this moment, Demon Prince Fulgrim, whose massive serpentine body was moving back and forth on the periphery of the battlefield, seemed to have detected Annihilation Bringer's true weakness. He shouted loudly towards Regent Guilliman and Luo Sha without any hesitation. Thump, thump, thump. The next moment, Luo Sha, who retained a sliver of sanity, was the first to act. While strenuously driving his vibranium power armor to initiate a combat charge, he also quickly replaced the blood scythe in his hands with the powerful Dawnbreaker. Rumble. When the Dawnbreaker, accompanied by an ear-piercing shriek, heavily struck the purple ground, visible, terrifying shockwaves rapidly spread out towards Annihilation Bringer's feet. Hiss, hiss, hiss. And at this moment, Demon Prince Fulgrim, whose entire massive serpentine body suddenly contracted and rebounded, also abruptly streaked across the air like a human cannonball just fired. He launched an unyielding, mad charge towards Annihilation Bringer, who was suffering from the torment of extremis. At the same time, the Emperor's sword, tightly gripped in Regent Guilliman's hand, also ignited with even hotter golden flames. And Guilliman, who acutely seized the opportunity to attack, immediately drove the armor of fate with all his might, launching an awe-inspiring combat charge towards Annihilation Bringer. Rumble. Just a few breaths later. Because of Luo Sha's terrifying shockwaves that covered the surrounding ground and Demon Prince Fulgrim's almost suicidal mad charge. Annihilation Bringer, temporarily deprived of its footing, completely entered an extremely brief airborne state. At this moment, not only did the vortex-like recoil force that the opponent could always release seem to have vanished without a trace. Even the slender body, which could long withstand the engulfment and tearing of countless metal torrents, quickly showed visible, grievous injuries. In other words, Demon Prince Fulgrim's observation was indeed correct. Annihilation Bringer's true source of power indeed originated from beneath the ground, or rather, from the ethereal concepts of the ground and the earth. As long as the opponent's slender body did not leave the ground by a single inch, then Annihilation Bringer was an uncookable, unbreakable P of the gods. Click, click, click. However, at this moment, when Regent Guilliman's Emperor's sword, accompanied by countless burning golden flames and an ear-piercing shriek, forcefully pierced through Annihilation Bringer's pitch-black head, which had no emotions or facial features. Annihilation Bringer, which had never made any sound, seemed to let out its first roar in its long existence as an emissary. Woo-wah. The next second, before Annihilation Bringer, in a dying state, could unleash any terrifying suicidal methods again. Streaks of golden flames burning from the inside out completely transformed the second emissary of the gods into white ashes flying across the sky. Whoosh! At this moment, Regent Guilliman's heavy breathing seemed to penetrate his entire metal helmet. Gradually echoing throughout Slaanesha's domain, which was permeated with the aura of desire. Brothers, we have finally successfully dealt with the second emissary of the gods. True victory is not far off. Regent Guilliman, whose fighting spirit grew even more vigorous, quickly turned around in his armor of fate and said in a deep voice to the Primarch brothers standing around him. However, he immediately saw. Whether it was Luo Sha, who had temporarily exited the warp liberation state, or Demon Prince Fulgrim, whose massive serpentine body instinctively coiled up. Or Perturabo, who was fully retracting countless extremists, almost every Gene Seed Primarch's face faintly showed a hint of profound confusion from the bottom of their hearts. Demon Prince Fulgrim, did you just have a fleeting sense of déjà vu? As if we've already successfully experienced the previous battle scene. At this moment, Luo Sha, with a slight frown, couldn't help but raise one of his vibranium hands and repeatedly examined it. He also slowly asked towards Demon Prince Fulgrim. My Lord Slaanesh has not replied to my inquiry, but I agree with your doubt. Demon Prince Fulgrim, whose delicate face showed no joy of victory, shook his head as he gazed at Guilliman and Perturabo and said, "Forget it, now is not a good time to discuss this issue. We need to continue providing combat support. My Lord Slaanesh has decreed that Mortarion on Nurgle's side is about to give out. Thank you for your support." Chapter 1027, Secret War, Invasion of the Gods 13. Boom. In an instant, a diamond-shaped kite shield, its surface constantly radiating golden light, slammed heavily into the ice-blue head of the infinite emissary Quasar, unleashing terrifying impacts visible to the naked eye. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. The next second, Lionel Johnson, his aged face resolute, used his incredibly seasoned combat skills to narrowly dodge the energy torrent fired by the infinite emissary. His massive body, encased in power armor, swiftly vanished into the depths of the verdant Caliban forest's illusion. At the same time, an enormous shadow raven, shrouded in endless streams of dark shadow, launched a diving attack from midair towards the infinite emissary Quasar, who was gradually growing mad in both his offensive actions and mental state. Roar. Almost simultaneously, Angron, his blood-red hand clutching a giant black sword, abruptly flapped his slightly tattered, blood-red wings. Roaring deafeningly, he swiftly launched an astonishingly powerful charge from behind the infinite emissary. Following this, on the crystal surface further away, Saifu Luo Sha, wielding his white tiger greatsword, led countless dark angels and absolvers in a relentless barrage of suppressive fire, ensuring the infinite emissary within their sight had no chance to catch his breath. To a certain extent, this encirclement, primarily maintained by gene seed primarchs like Lionel Johnson, Corvus Corax, Angron, and Magnus, was continuously draining the terrifying power unleashed by the infinite emissary. And this was one of the temporary battle plans that Lionel Johnson and Corvus Corax had immediately discussed upon arriving here. In fact, in the period before Lionel Johnson and the others arrived, Angron, who was enduring the infinite emissary's repeated rampage, and Magnus, who was desperately maintaining large-scale chaos sorcery, had already fallen into a state of utter despair. However, with Lionel Johnson and Corvus Corax successfully joining the battlefield, the brutal battle against the infinite emissary Quasar seemed to finally be seeing a glimmer of victory. Rumble. At this moment, as Corvus Corax repeatedly flapped his immense shadow wings, streams of dark shadow, like giant arrows, swiftly cut through the air, engaging in a continuous energy clash with the infinite emissary's energy torrents. Angron's giant black sword, imbued with unparalleled terrifying power, left increasingly fine cracks across the infinite emissary's ice-blue body. And Magnus, gritting his teeth, desperately maintained his large-scale chaos sorcery, constantly locking down the infinite emissary's combat range, preventing him from leaving the crystal labyrinth's surface by even half a step. As for the aged and cunning Lionel Johnson, he did not choose to engage in a direct frontal battle with the increasingly agitated infinite emissary. After all, the current Lionel Johnson could not, like Angron or even Corvus Corax, withstand the opponent's terrifying power or energy torrents with a powerful psychic physique far beyond imagination. Therefore, he employed a teleportation surprise attack tactic using his expertly honed warp essence. His massive body launched unceasing guerrilla warfare towards the infinite emissary from amidst the countless Caliban forest illusions that rose from the ground. And as time relentlessly passed, the infinite emissary Quasar, repeatedly besieged by several gene seed primarchs, seemed to finally be unable to hold on. Even though the opponent's internal energy was nearly limitless, and the injuries on his ice-blue body were not particularly severe, the gradual imbalance of his fighting will and overall mindset was a major problem. In fact, the greatest weakness of these god emissaries was that, since their birth, they had never fallen into a desperate situation in battle. Thus, they could not learn to adjust their individual mindsets, or even temper their will through continuous combat. Yet, many times, a battle is not fought solely on invincible strength, but on the fighting will of each side. Buzz, buzz, buzz. At this moment, the infinite emissary Quasar, having casually unleashed torrents of energy towards everyone present, immediately turned his body and launched an unstoppable, terrifying charge towards the junction of the crystal labyrinth and the cold void. But Lionel Johnson and Corvus Corax, who had already sensed his intention to retreat, would by no means let this golden opportunity slip away. They swiftly conveyed ancient battle gestures from 10,000 years ago to Angron and Magnus, spreading this concise intelligence information immediately. Thump, thump, thump. Khorne greater demons, each vigorously wielding a Khorne axe, along with countless Tzeentch greater demons flapping their blue wings, without any hesitation, launched continuous interception actions along the infinite emissary's escape path. Even Magnus, who was gritting his teeth to maintain the large-scale chaos sorcery, once again forcibly manipulated the omnipresent spatial fluctuations, pulling the attempting to escape infinite emissary back to his original starting point. Rumble. The next moment, before the increasingly explosive infinite emissary could unleash even more terrifying energy torrents, Lionel Johnson, his massive body suddenly leaping out from the Caliban forest illusion, had already plunged the power sword named Loyalty, held in his palm, deep into the infinite emissary's ice-blue body. Following this, an immense shadow giant raven, appearing as if by teleportation above his head, firmly gripped the infinite emissary's ice-blue shoulders with its two talons. Corvus Corax, without any hesitation, forcibly injected nearly infinite dark shadow into his body. Ah! In an instant, the infinite emissary Quasar's entire head jerked upwards. Large amounts of surging dark shadow continuously spewed from his blurred facial features. Even on that seemingly heavily scarred ice-blue body. Countless fine cracks that had existed for a long time suddenly swelled and tore open. Just a few seconds later, this god emissary, who had almost single-handedly suppressed 4 gene seed primarchs and countless chaos great demons, had no choice but to perish on the spot, completely shattering into large amounts of rapidly dissipating energy fluctuations. Rumble. However, before Lionel Johnson and Corvus Corax, their massive bodies fully bathed in energy fluctuations, could let out a sigh of relief. And briefly converse with Angron and Magnus, who stepped forward, to exchange the intelligence information they possessed. Terrifying sounds and spatial fluctuations from deep within the cold void immediately made everyone present look up. At this moment, the ethereal rift, whose size seemed to span countless light years, and was being firmly supported by countless celestial giants whose bodies far surpassed ordinary planets, had once again undergone terrifying changes far beyond everyone's imagination. Thank you all for your support. Chapter 1028 Secret War, God's Invasion 14. Hiss, hiss, hiss. Deep within Nurgle's domain, where countless corrupting mists and life vitality drifted back and forth, innumerable Nurgle demons were turned into fertilizer for the garden swamps and land by the rampaging devourer of worlds envoy, who rode a silver surfboard. Looking around, one could even see amidst the vast number of demon remnants flying everywhere. Clearly visible was a severed arm belonging to a Nurgle demon prince, the Death Guard's second in command, the Chaos Primarch Mortarion, slowly disintegrating into particles of decaying flesh and blood under the fierce impact of silver light afterimages. In fact, Mortarion looked incredibly miserable just from his appearance. His upper body was mutilated, the massive scales on his back were broken, and the barbarous armor covering his entire body was shattered. Even the scythe, Silence, held tightly in his sole hand, had long been broken into 2 pieces. Even if, a few breaths later, the incredibly generous blessings from Father Nurgle would restore Mortarion's armor, weapons, and even his broken body to their complete state. But Mortarion, whose pale face behind the breathing mask grew increasingly pained, did not step forward to launch a useless attack. Instead, under the heavy cover of countless Nurgle demons, he immediately drove his power armor to continuously retreat. To some extent, Mortarion's will to fight and all his combat beliefs had been completely shattered by the nearly invincible devourer of worlds envoy. Mortarion, increasingly lost and helpless, seemed to have returned to his homeworld, Barbarous, 10,000 years ago, when he, young and ignorant, first faced his alien father. No matter what combat techniques he employed or what fighting methods he devised, the powerful entity before him would successfully neutralize them one by one. And this sense of powerlessness, so familiar to Mortarion, even caused some more unbearable ancient memories to vaguely surface in the depths of his fractured soul. For example, the day he was forced to become a Nurgle follower for the safety of his countless descendants. Rumble. Just as Mortarion's consciousness briefly drifted, the light-speed impact from the Devourer of Worlds envoy, accompanied by deafening, terrifying sounds, once again blasted Mortarion's massive body away. After Mortarion, like a defeated dog, swiftly swept over countless garden plants and then forcefully crashed through the decaying bodies of numerous Nurgle demons. The Chaos Primarch, whose 2 magnetic boots were deeply embedded in the decaying ground, suddenly realized that the endless blessings from Father Nurgle seemed to have been temporarily interrupted. No, Father Nurgle, I was wrong. Mortarion, growing increasingly terrified, instinctively let out a deafening wail. He immediately drove his power armor, which was shedding countless armored plates, gripped the scythe, Silence, in his palms, and launched a desperate, incredibly tragic charge towards the rapidly approaching Devourer of Worlds envoy. However, how could Mortarion, who had lost his will and belief in battle, and lacked the blessings of Nurgle, be a match for the Devourer of Worlds envoy? Rumble. In just a moment, Mortarion's massive body endured continuous light-speed impacts from the Devourer of Worlds envoy. Unable to receive blessing-based repairs for his countless horrific injuries, Mortarion could only kneel, consciousness blurred, in the garden swamp. At this moment, he was like a lamb to the slaughter, his entire head gently grasped by the devourer of worlds envoy, who stood on a silver surfboard. It was at this instant, as Mortarion was about to become the spoils of the gods. In his hazy, blurred vision, he seemed to see a fleeting golden light suddenly erupt behind the devourer of worlds envoy's back. Father. Mortarion, disheartened to the point of wanting to embrace self-exile, subconsciously murmured. Hiss, hiss, hiss. However, at this moment, the Emperor's sword, with a sharp blade burning with blazing golden flames, forcefully pierced through the devourer of worlds envoy's silver metal chest. Countless metallic tides, like black mist, also surged onto the devourer of worlds envoy's silver face, devouring the omnipresent metal substance. Almost simultaneously, large numbers of shadowy, writhing dark shadows rapidly coiled around the devourer of worlds envoy's metallic body, firmly restraining his every movement. Immediately after, several demonic curved blades, their edges shrouded in purple aura, immediately, accompanied by incredibly piercing whistles, heavily slashed the back of the devourer of worlds envoy's metallic neck, attempting to chop off his entire head on the spot. Boom, boom, boom. At this moment, Luo Sha, who had returned to his crow-headed, human-bodied liberated state, Demon Prince Fulgrim, whose massive serpent body was repeatedly wreathed in purple aura, Regent Gilliman, whose entire massive body seemed shrouded in deep golden light, and Perturabo, whose physique was as massive as a metal mountain, descended like divine soldiers into Nurgle's domain. The next moment, Mortarion, who immediately sensed that countless Nurgle blessings were rapidly returning, also seemed to regain his will to fight. He then lifted the scythe, Silence, held tightly in his hands. The incredibly sharp blade, carrying a large amount of poisonous mist, fiercely embedded itself into the devourer of worlds envoy's metallic body. In an instant, the full force attacks from the many Primarchs all hit their intended targets. Luo Sha, reacting incredibly quickly, forcefully injected the dark shadow power accumulated within his massive body into the devourer of worlds envoy's silver metallic body. And Regent Gilliman, who had heavily stabbed the Emperor's sword, burning with blazing golden flames, into the opponent's body, showed no intention of retreating. With the subtle buzzing sounds continuously emanating from within the armor of fate, the terrifying power of the Emperor from deep within the Emperor's sword was being rapidly released. At this moment, even Perturabo, who was diligently controlling a large amount of extremis to devour metallic substances, also quickly relaxed his control over the nanobots. Looking around, it seemed only Demon Prince Fulgrim, whose massive serpent body was even more striking, unfortunately experienced Mortarion's tragic treatment. He was blasted away by a light-speed impact that was imperceptible to the naked eye. And when Luo Sha's dark shadow power, and the Emperor's fire from Regent Gilliman, plus the triple torment caused by Perturabo's nanobots quickly had a massive effect. Even the devourer of worlds envoy's entire metallic body had no choice but to instantly shatter into pieces, completely becoming nourishment for the extremis. At this moment, the last of the gods, envoys finally became the stepping stone for the 5 Gene Seed Primarchs united against a common foe. However, just as Luo Sha, who had revealed his massive body, instinctively exchanged glances with those around him. And as Regent Gilliman, driving the armor of fate, stepped forward and extended a large hand towards Mortarion, who was kneeling on one knee. Rumble. From deeper within the cold void. The terrifying change in that ethereal rift once again attracted everyone's attention. Thank you all for your support. Chapter 102, God's Invasion, Part 15. If anyone could look down from anywhere outside the ball system, beneath countless brilliant stars and a pitch-black curtain, that massive void rift, almost spanning countless light years, seemed to begin devouring everything around it. Stars were rapidly disappearing, and the curtain was being quickly torn apart. Whether it was the chaos psychic power spread throughout the entire ball system, or the very space-time structure of the galaxy itself, both seemed to be becoming fresh nourishment for this void rift to continue expanding. Furthermore, as time passed, the successfully devoured space-time structures formed countless terrifying space-time turbulences that darted around the cold void of the entire ball system. This caused many Chaos ships and Imperial ships that couldn't retreat in time to be torn apart and swallowed by the space-time turbulence on the spot, or even to revert to their original metallic forms due to time reversal. And judging from the current dire situation, if this void rift could not be closed, then, even if the Gene Seed Primarchs could temporarily set aside their differences and form a terrifying united force, and had finally eliminated the 4 incredibly powerful gods of creation envoys at the cost of continuous reincarnation. However, for the development of the entire battlefield situation, the victory of only a portion of the battles was merely a drop in the bucket for this war. Buzz buzz buzz. At this moment, all authority over time and space was gradually failing within the Ball system. And under the continuous scouring of countless space-time turbulences, large amounts of crystalline matter were constantly reflecting everything in the surrounding Tzeentch's domain. A colossal blue phantom, far exceeding the size of an ordinary planet and even without any discernible form, quickly revealed its existence. At this moment, as the most ancient chaos god in the high heavens, the great Tzeentch first glanced at the gradually expanding void rift. Then, he immediately flicked his illusory and formless finger towards Khorne's domain, which was countless light years away. The next moment, Khorne, the blood god, who was tightly gripping an incredibly terrifying great blood axe in his gigantic palm spanning several light years, also slowly nodded his dog-like head. Rumble rumble. In an instant, a bloody impact, almost penetrating the entire Ball system, slashed down towards the location of the void rift with a terrifying, destructive momentum. Among countless cold voids, the powerful space-time turbulences that could tear apart space and even time were unable to hinder it in the slightest, and were completely obliterated by a casual strike from Khorne, the blood god, leaving no trace. However, just as Khorne, the blood god's terrifying attack was about to fall upon the void rift, a pitch-black large hand, seemingly containing countless illusory stars within, also gently extended from inside the void rift. And with just a casual grasp, the star-filled large hand, with its 5 fingers spread, temporarily rendered Khorne, the blood god's bloody impact completely ineffective. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. At the same time, above Nurgle's domain, where viral aura and living matter were rising everywhere, Father Nurgle, who was stirring viscous liquid back and forth in front of a giant cauldron, also slowly revealed his immensely massive and terrifying figure. The perpetually smiling Father Nurgle first shook his fat, big-eared head towards Tzeentch and Khorne, the blood god, who were not far away. Immediately after, a large puddle of terrifying divine plague, enough to cause considerable discomfort to a chaos god, then streaked across the cold void and splattered onto the star-filled large hand that had not yet retracted. Sizzle sizzle sizzle. In an instant, the eternal star-filled large hand, belonging to one of the 5 gods of creation, was corroded by the terrifying divine plague from Father Nurgle, forming terrifying void black holes. The opponent's star-filled large hand immediately retreated rapidly into the depths of the void rift, carrying incredibly terrifying space-time fluctuations. Buzz buzz buzz. However, just as the corpulent Father Nurgle subconsciously let out a low chuckle that resonated throughout the entire Ball system, a terrifying ray of death, from one of the 5 gods of creation, instantly pierced through the void rift and struck Father Nurgle's massive body. At this moment, neither Khorne, the blood god, nor Tzeentch had any intention of intervening. They let out mocking laughter that echoed throughout the entire Ball system at the flustered Father Nurgle. Until Father Nurgle, who had endured the death ray, couldn't help but let out an incredibly painful howl. Further away, above Slaanesha's domain, Slaanesh, whose entire body seemed to be enveloped in countless desires, lazily swung an illusory long sword spanning the entire system and forcefully pierced deeper into the gradually expanding void rift. And when a painful cry from one of the 5 gods of creation, death, quickly spread into the galaxy, any matter or even concept that came into contact with its sound waves, whether time or space, gradually fell into an uncontrollable state of death. To some extent, this back and forth, turn-based exchange was merely a daily activity between the chaos gods and even the gods of creation. Whether it was the chaos gods, backed by the high heavens, or the gods of creation, born from the vast universe, minor damage could not pose any threat to their foundations. It was precisely because of this that even if the gods of creation had indeed initiated this massive and terrifying invasion, the chaos gods were not overly concerned about it. Instead, they considered it an unprecedented source of immense pleasure. Therefore, even though the chaos gods had already successfully manifested a terrifying power far beyond imagination in the real universe, thanks to the special environment of the Ball system, they did not harbor the determination or will to completely close the void rift. However, the endless depths of the high heavens were not home to only these four chaos gods. Rumble, rumble. At this moment, as the mutually gazing chaos gods patiently waited for the gods of creation to make their next move, between the cold void above the four chaos domains, a colossal, cold sun was slowly condensing an illusory shadow radiating 10,000 golden rays. At the same time, a terrifying entity resembling a black hole rapidly ascended from within the pitch-black curtain where the stars had dissipated. The next second, with the continuous prayers from countless human believers, and the ceaseless painful wails from countless Xenos and all things in the universe, under the increasingly grim gaze of the four chaos gods, the terrifying powers from the great god emperor and the sixth chaos god quickly intertwined and merged, then fiercely sliced through the cold void and smashed into the void rift. Rumble, rumble. In an instant, after the countless space-time turbulences formed by shattered time and space gradually subsided, the massive void rift, which the gods of creation had painstakingly torn open, was now reduced to a mere subtle crack less than several million kilometers wide. Thank you all for your support. Chapter 1030, Brothers at Odds, Infighting. In fact, when this invasion war from the gods of creation developed to this point, neither the loyalist Primarchs, represented by Luo Sha, nor the Chaos Primarchs, represented by Angron and others, had anything to do with the subsequent plans for this universe war. Unless they could instantly expand their combat power to an extent that the actual universe could not tolerate, they wouldn't even have a chance to touch the chessboard. And for the Primarchs who had witnessed the gods fighting with their own eyes, this undoubtedly made them realize the huge, chasm-like gap more clearly. Chirp, chirp, chirp. At this moment, seeing the Emperor and the sixth Chaos God, Luo Sha, who had appeared with a roar, were working together to restore the Void Rift. After the Chaos Gods looked at each other from a distance, they immediately used their respective methods to provide more help for the successful closure of the Void Rift. Above the Tzeentch's domain, where countless crystal domes shimmered, Tzeentch, whose form was ethereal, gently waved his incomparably illusory blue hand. In an instant, the Ball Secundus satellite, located in orbit around Ball Prime, was forcibly moved into the field of vision of the Chaos Gods by extremely terrifying psychic power, like a tiny marble. Almost at the same time, amidst Khorne's domain, where countless blood-colored auras repeatedly surged, Khorne, the blood god with a dog-like head, who was holding a terrifying great axe in one hand, also suddenly raised a blood-red hand and made a distant grasping motion. Looking out, Ball Secundus, which was rapidly rotating in the cold void, accumulating its initial speed, seemed to have been forcibly infused with an astronomical amount of Khorne's blessings. This caused countless hills, mountains, valleys, and plains to be completely corrupted into an unsalvageable blood-red color by endless chaos power. Every inch of the entire satellite's surface seemed to possess a terrifying vitality far beyond human imagination, and even deep within the crust, fresh substances like flesh, bones, and veins rapidly grew. Overall, the mass and overall strength of this satellite planet itself undoubtedly reached an unimaginable level for mortals. Following this, increasingly viscous and strange sounds echoed from Nurgle's domain, where large amounts of green mist permeated everywhere. Father Nurgle, who was carefully hiding behind a giant cauldron, also chuckled as he vigorously sprinkled countless Nurgle viruses, bacteria, and countless vigorous life forces onto the living planet that was emitting low roars. He only reluctantly stopped all movements in his fat hand when, from a distance, the blood-red living planet seemed to have been forcibly clad in a layer of green outer clothing. And within Slaanesha's domain, where countless desire auras drifted back and forth. Slaanesh, whose movements and never revealed expression were even more languid and enchanting, seemed to let out a soft laugh, and it slightly trembled its slightly blurred and terrifying finger. The living planet, radiating blood red and decaying green, was also heavily surrounded by endless Slaanesha's blessings. To some extent, Baal Secundus, which had already become a living toy of the Chaos Gods, undoubtedly became an extremely qualified consumable weapon. Boom, boom, boom. Not long after, when the Void Rift, which was being rapidly healed by the Emperor and Luo Sha, in the Cold Void, had less than 100,000 kilometers of length remaining. This living planet, which had personally received a large infusion of Chaos God blessings from the 4 Chaos Gods, let out a terrifying roar that echoed throughout the entire Baal system, and like a spherical cannonball just fired, it was instantly launched by countless psychic powers, and after traversing the entire Cold Void, it forcefully crashed into another deep space of the Void Rift. At this moment, the living planet, which was repeatedly emitting terrifying roars from within its massive body, seemed to be carrying a tragic momentum of going forward without hesitation. It almost immediately interrupted the subsequent methods that the gods of creation wanted to re-initiate. And when the last inch of imperfection in that void rift was successfully mended by the Emperor and Luo Sha, it also symbolized that the entire plan of the gods' invasion was completely halted. However, at this time, for the countless mortals and Astartes who were still in this special area of the Baal system, their battle was far from over. Baal Prime, the desert area around Archangel Fort. God machines, each heavily enveloped by the golden light emitted by the burning Imperial Blood Banner, led countless knight armor from knight houses, successfully teleporting back to the Imperial territory. In fact, due to Luo Sha's incomparably generous contribution of Emperor's Blood Banner and Guilliman's strong prevention of chaos corruption, this terrifying combat force from 4 Titan legions did not suffer much loss after continuously fighting in the chaos domains. This was undoubtedly a glorious achievement that could be recorded in Imperial history. However, at this moment, neither the Titan captains, whose minds were one with the god machines, nor the ubiquitous armor knights had any slack. They quickly raised their still loaded firepower configurations, firmly locking onto the massive figures deep in the desert. At this moment, facing Luo Sha, who was clutching Dawnbreaker, Regent Guilliman, who was holding the Emperor's sword, Corvus Corax, whose entire body was entwined with large amounts of dark shadow, and Lionel Johnson, who was clutching the Emperor's scutum and a loyal longsword respectively. Demon Prince Fulgrim, with a playful expression on his beautiful face, Angron, whose ugly head buzzed with the butcher's nails, and the taciturn Mortarion, as well as Magnus, whose blood-red single eye was full of schemes, also stood scattered together. And at the edge between the two sides, Perturabo, with countless extremis hovering over one of his metal hands, repeatedly stared at every movement of both sides with great interest, and even Lorgar, the Primarch of Shame, who was forcibly trampled under his heavy foot, slightly raised his expressionless, swollen face. As chaos undivided, they seemed to be secretly guessing which side would be the ultimate victor. When the terrifying invasion of the gods of creation was completely thwarted, the hearts of the Primarch brothers, which had just mended, quickly developed an invisible, huge rift. Just as loyalty and betrayal cannot merge with each other, the loyalist Primarchs present were also unable to completely resolve the deep-seated hatred from 10,000 years ago with the traitors before them. Before we both make a move, I have a small suggestion. Enough fighting and lives have been lost in the Baal system during this period, how about we directly abandon this conflict? This is the largest gathering of us Primarch brothers in nearly 10,000 years, and I think the Emperor, deep in the cold void, is undoubtedly filled with emotion. At this moment, Luo Sha, whose massive body slowly drove his vibranium power armor forward, turned his cold gaze towards the traitor Primarchs in his field of vision and said in a deep voice, "Thank you all for your support. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories." Haha, put away that pathetic look, damn Luo Sha. As soon as Luo Sha finished speaking, the first to step forward was naturally Magnus, holding a golden scepter. In fact, judging from the current situation alone, as Tzeentch Demon Prince, he seemed more like Khorne Demon Prince than Angron, filled with anxiety and anger in both his words and actions. My little brother, the feuds between us have lasted for tens of thousands of years. If a mere, unavoidable joint battle could make us change our minds, aren't you a bit too naive? At the same time, Demon Prince Fulgrim, with his massive serpent body winding forward, also gazed at Luo Sha's colossal form with an evil glint in his eyes, speaking with a hint of emotion. However, at this moment, Luo Sha, tightly gripping Dawnbreaker in his massive palm, shook his head slightly. He first turned left and right to quickly exchange glances with his other Primarch brothers, then calmly said to Magnus and Demon Prince Fulgrim, "I merely gave you a choice. As for whether you accept it, that's your problem. However, since you want to fight, we will accompany you to the end." Before Luo Sha finished speaking, Regent Guilliman, clad in the armor of fate, stepped forward first. The Emperor's sword, tightly clutched in his massive palm, immediately blazed with even more intense golden flames. And Corvus Corax, with his black hair wildly dancing, instinctively revealed a sinister smile from his pale lips, his entire massive body instantly lifted into the air by countless dark shadows. Lionel Johnson, standing to the side, did not say much. The expression on his aged face gradually became solemn, and the Emperor's shield and sword of loyalty were both raised before him. Rumble. However, just as the fierce battle between the two sides was about to begin, the entire Ball Prime's sky, which had originally returned to normal, was rapidly engulfed by endless darkness and layers of tragic wails. The next moment, a terrifying entity, resembling a constantly spinning black hole yet also a featureless human face, rapidly appeared above the sky of Ball Prime. It was at this moment that Luo Sha, with battle intent boiling deep within his massive body, suddenly clutched his head and let out a deafening scream. He even directly knelt down on the desert ground. In fact, Luo Sha was not the only one in such a state. Apart from Corvus Corax and Lionel Johnson, who looked extremely wary, and Perturabo and Lorgar, who were full of doubt. Regent Guilliman, who was kneeling on one knee, Magnus, who was secretly casting spells, Angron, who was eager for slaughter, and the taciturn Mortarion, as well as the stiff-faced Demon Prince Fulgrim, all painfully knelt heavily onto the sand. In an instant, one horrifying scene after another, filled with blood and tragedy, immediately appeared deep within everyone's blurred vision. The first to appear seemed to be the familiar scene of Angron fighting Devourer of Worlds Envoy Space Captain. At this moment, Khorne Demon Prince Angron seemed to have become an incredibly resilient human punching bag, being repeatedly thrashed by the incredibly powerful Space Captain, and even having his entire head torn off. But the moment Angron was successfully banished back into the depths of the warp, everything around Devourer of Worlds Envoy Space Captain seemed to fall completely into a special state of time solidification. When countless dark characters, like ancient runes or mysterious knowledge, rapidly emerged from the bloody air, all time seemed to undergo a bizarre phenomenon of flowing backward, until the head that Angron had been torn off by the opponent returned to its proper place on his body. The next second, the two sides, seemingly unaware of this, continued their incredibly fierce battle. And this time, Angron, instinctively more cautious, seemed to gradually learn how to deal with Devourer of Worlds Envoy Space Captain. At the very least, he was not forcibly banished back into the depths of the warp by the opponent, and even managed to hold out until Luo Sha and Guilliman's support arrived. Following that, the scene changed once again. This time, it showed Luo Sha and others fighting Annihilation Bringer Vortex. When everyone present, according to the predetermined plan, successfully inflicted irreparable and terrifying injuries on Annihilation Bringer Vortex. Annihilation Bringer, seemingly crying for the first time, brazenly activated an incredibly terrifying spatial self-detonation method. In an instant, both the cold-eyed Demon Prince Fulgrim and the nearby Luo Sha and Guilliman were forcibly torn into inch-by-inch fragments of flesh and blood by the distorted and terrifying spatial fluctuations. But the next moment, when everything had become irreparable, all surrounding time seemed to begin a bizarre phenomenon of flowing backward. Only this time, Perturbo's sudden appearance with Extremis undoubtedly caused great trouble for Annihilation Bringer's spatial self-detonation method, and also laid the sole foundation for everyone's victory. Next, the scene within the Primarch's field of vision changed again. On the shattered surface covered with crystal and metal fragments, Luo Sha, scarred all over his vibranium power armor, casually supported Magnus, whose limbs were broken, and Perturbo's massive metal body was completely torn into metallic debris flying everywhere. Not far away, a burning Emperor's sword was obliquely inserted deep into the crystal ground. Guilliman's battered body, covered with terrifying pits, was firmly supported by Angron's blood-red remains, both using all their strength not to fall directly to the ground, and buying more time for their mutual recovery. And in front of them, dozens of infinite envoy quasars, having successfully activated some berserk form, were coldly looking down at the many Primarchs below. When everything reached its end, the rapidly flowing back time undoubtedly gave the utterly defeated Primarchs another chance to defeat their powerful opponents. This time, they collectively took 8 attempts to finally achieve victory in the brutal battle. And when everyone faced the Devourer of Worlds envoy, Regent Guilliman, with the weakest average combat power, was undoubtedly the first Gene Seed Primarch to die in battle. He was completely torn into countless fragments of flesh and blood by the incoming light speed impact, and because everything happened too quickly, everyone present was unable to save Guilliman. Facing such a situation, the grief-stricken Luo Sha completely fell into a frenzied, berserk warp liberation state. He, along with Angron, who also let out a sorrowful roar, and Demon Prince Fulgrim, whose expression was incredibly distorted, launched a relentless death charge towards the Devourer of Worlds envoy. And this time, it took all of them a full 13-time reversal rebirth opportunities to completely defeat the incredibly powerful Devourer of Worlds envoy. Thank you for your support. Chapter 1032, Feigning Compliance and the Retreat of the Evil Gods. On the turbulent Ball Prime, the sudden arrival of a Chaos God caused immense pressure on all things in this world. Looking around, it seemed that only the god machines standing within the burning Imperial blood banners covered area, and a large number of rider armors, were not overly affected. After the initial panic, countless Titan captains and Knight pilots, relying on their loyal faith in the Primarchs and even the Emperor, swiftly raised heavy firepower weapons of immense caliber towards the sky, launching continuous bombardments at the omnipresent Sixth Chaos God. Although this did not achieve much, and the Sixth Chaos God was even too lazy to counterattack, it symbolized the Empire's and humanity's desire for struggle and resistance. At the same time, outside Axe Angel Fort, Luo Sha, who had just been forcibly injected with some missing memories, slowly raised his lowered, heavy head. With eyes that were involuntarily seeping light golden blood, he looked directly at the Sixth Chaos God for the first time with such clarity. In fact, Luo Sha had vaguely guessed that there were some unspeakable tricks in the battles against those gods of creation's envoys. But he had never thought that the decisive factor would not be the Emperor, but the so-called Luo Sha. What exactly do you want to do? At this moment, Luo Sha, with veins bulging on his bronze face, faced the terrifying pressure from a Chaos God, and screamed at the opponent with all his might. And the Primarch brothers around him, whether they were Chaos Primarchs enduring terrifying pressure, or loyal Primarchs still able to stand aside, all cast their uncertain gazes upon Luo Sha's massive body. Ascension. You must embark on the path of ascension. Otherwise, you will be of no use. In an instant, the low growl mixed with roars from the Sixth Chaos God forcefully slammed into Luo Sha's ears like layers of terrifying noise. The repeated echoes of these terrifying sounds forced him to shake his head vigorously to barely maintain his consciousness. What if I don't agree? At this moment, Luo Sha, with light golden blood flowing from both his eyes and the depths of his ear canals, growled through gritted teeth. Then your descendants, your brothers, your loved ones, will pay an even more tragic price for your actions. At this moment, as the sixth Chaos God's emotionless evil whispers echoed repeatedly in Luo Sha's ears. Warp gates, torn open by force, quickly appeared around the many Primarchs, even subtly forming an encirclement. At this moment, Korax of the Raven Guard, with countless dark shadows surging all over his body, and Lionel Johnson, who had re-raised the Emperor's aegis, instantly heightened their vigilance. Both of them were mentally prepared to continue fighting and slaying. And even Perturabo, who had been secretly observing the sixth Chaos God from time to time, slowly straightened his immense metallic body, with countless extremis viruses rapidly swirling around him. Clearly, as a Chaos Undivided, he seemed to intend to launch a battle of protection for these temporarily incapacitated Primarch brothers. However, no Chaos Demon surged out from the depths of these newly appeared warp gates. Luo Sha immediately turned his head and saw Time Remnants, each looking almost identical to him in appearance and equipment, glaring menacingly at everyone present. At the same time, some warp gates at the edges contained the Typhoon Fleet, which was regrouping, and Saint Celestine, who was spreading her wings and soaring, or dark-haired, purple-eyed girls hidden deep within countless Hive City planets. If you dare to go after them. At this moment, Luo Sha, his eyes gradually turning bloodshot, threatened the sixth Chaos God through gritted teeth. Why do you not understand? You are I, and I am you. If you believe this is a betrayal of the human empire and loyal faith, then I can tell you, it was the great Emperor who tacitly allowed this to happen. Now, with the gods of creation eyeing the entire galaxy from outside, and 4 unpredictable Chaos Gods harboring ill intentions towards you from within, even the powerful Emperor is hard-pressed to cope alone. If you wish to continue protecting humanity and all things, you must pay a terrifying price far beyond what mortals can imagine. At this moment, the sixth Chaos God's attitude towards Luo Sha seemed to have softened slightly. Even the layers of terrifying wails seemed to have diminished considerably out of thin air. And after the opponent's low murmurs echoed repeatedly in Luo Sha's ears. Luo Sha took a deep breath, then suddenly narrowed his eyes and slowly asked. If I truly want to successfully ascend, then what do I need to do? As soon as Luo Sha finished speaking, in an instant, the seemingly omnipresent sixth Chaos God immediately erased the warp gates surrounding the many Primarchs. Even the invisible pressure exerted on everyone completely disappeared. This is not something that can be explained in just a few words. Go to the depths of the far eastern starfield and find a planet named Moros to meet us in person. As a starting point for your friendly exchange with us, the chaos domains entrenched within this star system will be our first gift to you. At this moment, the terrifying whispers from the sixth Chaos God quickly faded from Luo Sha's ears. Buzz buzz buzz. The next moment, the chilling sun, which was confronting the Chaos Gods in the depths of the icy void, instantly joined forces with the terrifying black hole-like star to fight the enemy. Even if Khorne the Blood God instantly brandished his terrifying axe spanning countless light years, and Father Nurgle violently shook his giant cauldron, from which countless green mists perpetually rose. Even Tzeentch, who intended to watch the show, teamed up with Slaanesh, planning to unleash a super warp storm that would engulf the entire star system. However, the terrifying power that the Emperor and Luo Sha could unleash, without needing to guard against each other and with perfect coordination, was absolutely incomparable to these Chaos Gods. As countless golden rays from the chilling sun continuously dissipated the omnipresent chaos psychic power and eliminated chaos corruption in every inch of the icy void. The terrifying black hole-like star also successively devoured the counter-attacks from the other Chaos Gods. After just a few breaths, the 4 Chaos Domains, which were losing the support of the real universe, immediately fell into an increasingly illusory special state, and even gradually returned to the depths of the high heavens. Thank you all for your support. Chapter 1033, Seeking the Path to Godhood. As countless chaos psychic power rapidly dissipated within Luo Sha's field of vision, whether it was Demon Prince Fulgrim, Angron, Magnus, or Mortarion. These traitor Primarchs who had pledged allegiance to the Chaos Gods were all unceremoniously dragged back into the depths of the warp by their respective masters. Once everything around them had completely settled, the cold sun and the terrifying star in the frigid void also swiftly vanished from the native universe. If not for the colossal shipwrecks still floating in the universe, it would be as if all the previous wars had never occurred. At this moment, Luo Sha, whose massive body was slowly rising in his vibranium power armor, instinctively exchanged glances with the Regent Gilliman, who had a complex expression. And Corvus Corax and Lionel Johnson immediately fixed their cold gazes on Perturabo, who was trampling the Primarch-shaming Lorgar. However, to everyone's surprise, Perturabo, who had already mastered the great weapon known as Extremis, did not adopt a battle stance. He bent down and picked up the struggling Lorgar, then generously gestured to Luo Sha that they could be re-imprisoned in the Hypercube Labyrinth. Although Luo Sha was slightly puzzled by Perturabo's change in attitude, he still casually pulled out the green glowing Hypercube Labyrinth and, driving his vibranium power armor, walked towards Perturabo. However, just before the other party was completely sealed within the Hypercube Labyrinth, Perturabo also lowered his voice and said to Luo Sha, "Luo Sha, if I were you, I wouldn't believe a single word that big guy says. I myself represent Chaos Undivided, and I profoundly understand what chaos is." At this moment, the expressionless Luo Sha did not say much more to him. He merely nodded slightly to Perturabo in thanks. Then, he successfully sent Perturabo and Lorgar, who couldn't help but let out a painful howl, into the Hypercube Labyrinth. Immediately after, Luo Sha, driving his vibranium power armor, turned and approached Corvus Corax and Lionel Johnson, embracing the two long-separated loyal Primarchs tightly. Looking on, even the Regent Gilliman, whose resolute face usually showed little emotion, unconsciously revealed a fleeting smile. Rumble. Amidst the frigid void, colossal ships belonging to the Typhoon Fleet and the Indomitus Fleet were slowly returning to the shattered spaceport of Bal Prime. Thanks to the meticulous arrangements of the Regent Gilliman and Luo Sha, among others. Apart from a few extremely unlucky capital ships that unfortunately became casualties of the gods' invasion, the vast majority of the fleet's strength and Astartes' progeny were successfully preserved, with only very minimal losses. In fact, compared to the incredibly terrifying scale of this war, it was completely insignificant. Furthermore, according to the salvage operations initiated by Redditus and others on countless giant cosmic warship wrecks, perhaps the human empire's overall ship manufacturing capabilities and ship-mounted weapon firepower would receive a considerable boost. However, this would require some time for research and experimentation. And inside Axe Angel Fort on Bal Prime, the belated Omegan also met Lionel Johnson and Corvus Corax for the first time. After everyone had taken their seats, Corvus Corax, whose massive body seemed to have shrunk considerably, first spoke to Luo Sha and the others. "Brothers, although I am very reluctant to part from this meeting, my time to remain in the native universe is limited. Ever since I awakened my warp essence deep within the warp, I have become bound to the warp. Rather than saying I am still a Gene Seed Primarch, it's more accurate to say I am a Chaos Demigod belonging to the warp. Therefore, my advice to everyone is that unless you face a life or death crisis, you must never release your warp essence within the warp. Perhaps your power will be infinitely strengthened, but you will inevitably merge and bind with the warp, making it impossible to easily return to the native universe." Corvus Corax's heartfelt words caused Luo Sha, Lionel Johnson, and Omegan present to nod repeatedly. And the Regent Gilliman, who had never perceived any warp essence, frowned slightly but had nothing to say. "Furthermore, I have already, in Corax's name, externally summoned all scattered Raven Guard progeny. Luo Sha, from now on, the Raven Guard Legion completely belongs to you. I hope you treat these progeny, who have suffered countless hardships, well. As for your giant Raven Guard plan, while I don't entirely approve of it, I don't oppose it either. After all, allowing the Raven Guard progeny to continue fighting for the Empire's citizens is also a necessary measure." At this moment, Corvus Corax's voice had just fallen. Luo Sha, who slowly took a deep breath through his nose and mouth, was silent for a moment, then he spoke. Brothers, this time, you have personally experienced the immense threat from both the gods of creation and the chaos gods. In fact, if it weren't for the existence of the Emperor and even the sixth chaos god, the situation we face now would undoubtedly be even more dire. I don't want to fall into this kind of utterly helpless scenario again when facing the gods of creation or the chaos gods next time. Therefore, I have decided to embark on that path to godhood that I have always been avoiding. I want to become a player on this chessboard, not a pawn with no retreat. At this moment, Luo Sha's low voice undoubtedly plunged the Primarchs present into silence. The sights and sounds from not long ago had undoubtedly cast an unspeakable shadow over everyone's hearts. To some extent, they had actually always been hiding under the Emperor's protection, never truly knowing the terror of the chaos gods in the warp or even the gods of creation. But now, this invisible thin membrane had been completely punctured. In the past, the Primarchs' own strength might have been able to influence the fate of a sector or determine the outcome of an apocalyptic battle, but now they are almost losing the qualifications to even step onto the chessboard. Of course, I will not act recklessly according to the path guided by the so-called sixth chaos god. I will personally find that legendary path to godhood. In addition, various powerful forces from the native universe will also become a help for us against foreign enemies. This will at least buy us more time for our future. Lionel Johnson, if there are no unexpected circumstances, Saifu Luo Sha will temporarily not be by your side. He will set off for Terra in the native universe to seek an ancient power called Sprite Power. May the Emperor, in the unseen, bless Saifu Luo Sha's every action with utmost smoothness. Thank you all for your support. Happy Halloween to all readers. Chapter 1034, Brothers Separate and a New Journey. This meeting among the loyal Primarchs quickly formulated a series of revitalization plans. In the time that followed, both the two massive fleets undergoing extensive repairs and the no longer complete ball system were forced into a stable period of recuperation. According to the arrangements made at the meeting, Regent Gilliman, who was clearly more adept at internal affairs and operations, even temporarily took over all command authority for development matters from Luo Sha. Under the frantic efforts of millions of smart control legions and countless mortals, Baal Prime, once belonging to the Blood Angels, and its sole remaining moon, Ba Wei, were being thoroughly fortified. Looking out, the former desert areas had transformed into layered metal defensive walls, and the jagged mountains had become various types of war fortresses. If all the vast underground tunnels could be exposed to the sky, the entire planet's surface would likely be completely covered. In fact, none of the Primarchs, including Luo Sha, believed that Regent Gilliman's approach was too reckless. Especially for the Astartes veterans who had successively experienced the Tyrannid Swarm and the invasion of the gods of creation, they wished to arm Baal Prime to the teeth within permissible conditions. Soon after, deep within the cold void of the Baal system, large ornithopter reconnaissance instruments detected signals indicating the presence of numerous unknown fleets. After a false alarm, everyone discovered that it was the first batch of Raven Guard, responding to the call of Corvus Corax, who had incredibly difficultly traversed the Imperium Nihilus to reach Baal Prime. Due to the overly cumbersome communication and departure processes within the Imperium Nihilus, the number of Raven Guard who arrived this time was not large, only around 10,000. This was because Luo Sha had already lifted the restrictions of the Astartes Codex on the Raven Guard. According to the detailed report from the newly arrived Raven Guard chapter master to Luo Sha and his Gene Father Corax, the entire Raven Guard was gradually recovering its massive size from the Legion era. Currently, the number of Raven Guards scattered outside had already reached around 40,000, and with those who arrived this time and the Astartes still on guard, the total number was over 53,000. Perhaps because his own goal had been successfully achieved, and he saw that his children's development was also returning to the right track, Corvus Corax, with no regrets, seemed unable to resist the repulsive force from the real universe any longer. However, before leaving, Corvus Corax also met individually with his little brother Luo Sha, Lionel Johnson, Regent Gilliman, and the taciturn Omegan, among other brothers. Among them, Lionel Johnson, Regent Gilliman, and Luo Sha also received a blood sacrifice ritual related to Corvus Corax. It was said that this was psychic knowledge obtained by some Raven Guard librarians, who wished to welcome back their Gene Father, at the cost of their lives and even souls. If they encountered increasingly urgent battle situations again in the future, they could choose to perform a blood sacrifice ritual with a large number of enemy corpses, which would allow them to resummon Corvus Corax from the depths of the warp. As Corvus Corax himself joked, he was now less a Gene Seed Primarch and more a minor Chaos God embarking on his own venture. However, when bidding farewell to his closest little brother Luo Sha, Corax also vaguely revealed some secrets. This time, he might, under the Emperor's arrangement, rendezvous with the Wolf King Leman Russ, who had been in the warp for countless years, to assist him in finding something far older than the Chaos Gods. Corax speculated it might be a mysterious object that could completely heal the Emperor's injuries, or something similar. Only such things were the most needed remedies for the human empire today. After Corvus Corax silently returned to the depths of the warp, Regent Gilliman, who had successfully put all internal affairs between Baal Prime and Ba Wei completely on track, was also about to set sail again. In a sense, neither the other half of the unaffected imperial territory nor the ongoing second phase of the Indomitus Crusade could proceed without Gilliman's personal command. Therefore, when the main vessels of the Indomitus Crusade fleet had completely finished their large-scale refit and successfully delivered a batch of Primaris Astartes, who originally belonged to the Blood Angels, to Dante, Regent Gilliman, without any hesitation, also performed a farewell ceremony with his little brother Luo Sha, Lionel Johnson, and Omegan. Subsequently, he swiftly led countless Ultramarines descendants onto his own long journey. At the same time, more of Luo Sha's Typhoon fleet were undergoing their final repairs. Having endured 2 apocalyptic wars consecutively, the massive fleet, which appeared to be severely depleted, had, in fact, significantly increased its combat power after receiving full replenishment from the Blood Angels' combined fleet and the addition of considerable extraterrestrial universe technology. The personnel numbers of each Astartes company were also undergoing various levels of subtle adjustments. If the Steel Fist, Gang Tai Ji Quan Immortal Legion, the sole secret within the Typhoon fleet, was included, the total number of Astartes in the entire Typhoon fleet was almost over 100,000. Not to mention that 4 Titan legions could not leave for a short period and needed to continue following Luo Sha on campaigns for some time. However, the survival of countless descendants and the entire fleet did not bring Luo Sha much comfort. Especially when he spent a long time contemplating on his metal throne and subconsciously called out to his close guards beside him. The Astartes who appeared in his field of vision again was no longer Craig, the familiar leader of the giant Raven Guard. If no miracle occurred, the other party, who had already been declared fallen in battle, had vanished with Baal Secundus, which had become a living planet, into this cold and ruthless galaxy. And every time he thought of this, a deep and unresolvable sadness would flicker in the depths of Luo Sha's cold eyes. Gloriana-class battleship, Steel Fist, Gang Tai Ji Quan. At a position below the massive bridge, in front of a huge transparent porthole where thick defensive armor plating had fully risen, Luo Sha's massive body stood on the metallic sheened floor. His cold gaze, seemingly devoid of emotional fluctuations, stared at the countless glittering star clusters and the pitch-black, cold void that filled his entire field of vision. Thump, thump, thump. Just then, a sound of magnetic boots clashing from behind temporarily interrupted Luo Sha's swirling thoughts. Saifu Luo Sha has taken a group of formidable absolvers from Lionel Johnson, and your disciple, High Sister Jessica, has also led the Deadpool Corps and some Astartes who voluntarily followed her on a journey. All of them have returned to native Terra to seek even greater power. Omegan, whose short, sturdy body still retained layers of afterimages, said calmly as he stood behind Luo Sha, clad in emerald green scales. So, Luo Sha, what is our next destination? Don't tell me you're going to let the entire fleet wander aimlessly in the Imperium Nihilus. Thank you all for your support. Chapter 1035, Hunting Target, Vashtor. Luo Sha, who heard Omegan's low voice, did not respond immediately. He gazed at the cold void beyond the huge transparent viewport and slowly asked, Omegan, have you heard of the planet Moros? At this moment, Omegan, whose indifferent face showed no emotional fluctuations, seemed to reveal a hint of unusual expression at the familiar word Luo Sha spoke. He did not give any answer but instead posed another question to Luo Sha's broad back. Luo Sha, do you think you are destined to be a chess player who controls the board? Even if you succeed, how much of your current self do you think remains? This is a question worth pondering, and I hope you will think about it carefully. As soon as Omegan finished speaking, Luo Sha, whose massive body was encased in vibranium power armor, slowly turned around. He narrowed his eyes, looking down at Omegan standing not far away, and said indifferently, Brother, I was just asking you a normal question. I know what the hell Moros is. It's the only ritual site where the chaos gods of the high heavens can communicate with the real universe. I also know that both Lorgar and Horus went to that place before their complete fall. At this moment, Omegan, hearing Luo Sha's words, seemed to take a deep breath. He gazed at Luo Sha's bronze face with sincere expression and said in a deep voice, Since that's the case, then you should know what it means. Perhaps in your opinion, the great emperor's failure to appear and object to your idea is tacit approval, but I have to tell you, my brother, a true father would not watch his child step into a pit of fire. Is he truly doing what's best for you? Or, is he still he if he allows you to act recklessly? Haven't you noticed that the Emperor now has no extra humanity left, only those selfless divine attributes? From a macroscopic perspective of benefit, your pursuit of the path to godhood is understandable, but brother, are you sure you are truly prepared to give up and abandon everything? At this moment, Omegan's low words drilled into Luo Sha's ears like a continuous incantation. Luo Sha, whose expression on his face showed no extra changes, did not open his mouth to refute. Instead, he quietly listened to all of the others' words. After Omegan finished speaking everything in one breath, Luo Sha, who also took a deep breath, then said faintly, My brother, I know you are worried about my situation. To be honest, I also believe that some of my actions are like walking a tightrope over boiling magma, often just one step away from truly falling. But everything in the cold universe waits for no one. Even the current human empire, without the Emperor's blessing and the sacrifice and dedication of countless loyal mortals and even Astartes, the human race might have long disappeared in countless terrifying wars. Moreover, it seems that with the return of each Primarch, the current human empire is gradually recovering, as if even the prosperity of the past is within reach. But only Guilliman and I truly know that all of this is nothing more than an incredibly illusory false scene. Perhaps there's something you don't know yet. I guess Guilliman can only confide in me, that is, the Golden Throne is failing year by year. If there's no way to save it, the helpless Emperor will be forced to become a god. I think you should know something about the history of the Eldar, who once gave birth to a chaos god, right? Even with their former prosperity, they have become half dead as they are now. So do you think our human race can withstand such a collapse, far beyond what anyone can imagine? At this moment, Luo Sha's heartfelt words clearly made Omegan fall into complete silence. After a long period of contemplation by both sides, Omegan then asked Luo Sha, So, no matter how hard we loyal Primarchs struggle, is this the only path left? Perhaps there are other ways, but among the paths to salvation where the risks and costs can still be borne by me alone, this is the only one left. Luo Sha, taking a slow, deep breath, said to Omegan with extreme solemnity. Omegan, didn't you just ask me what I'm going to do next? I plan to lead the Typhoon fleet to hunt the Chaos Demigod, the Creator, the Lord of the Forge, Vashtor. In some sense, he might be one of the most powerful beings closest to a Chaos God. Perhaps there are countless similar beings deep within the high heavens, but not many can freely roam in the real universe. From my conjecture, I might need a large amount of chaos knowledge from the high heavens, as well as detailed information about the chaos god. Therefore, I believe Vashtor, who greatly covets the chaos god, is undoubtedly the best candidate. However, as soon as Luo Sha finished speaking, Omegan, with a slight frown, said to him, "Wait, Vashtor, the Lord of the Forge. How do I remember you once told me that you have had countless conflicts with him? You actually want to seek chaos knowledge from a sworn enemy. Brother, if you are truly determined to go down this path, my suggestion is to choose a more stable method. For example, have the librarian brothers act immediately, summoning unknown chaos demons from the depths of the warp again and again, and try to extract or trick more chaos information from them. Perhaps these old methods are slower and clumsier, but at least you won't have to pay too much of a price, and you can repeatedly cross-verify the authenticity of certain information." At this moment, Omegan's many words made Luo Sha, who unconsciously widened his eyes, nod repeatedly. After the other party had completely finished speaking, Luo Sha's vibranium hand suddenly lifted and heavily patted Omegan's thick shoulder plate. He said to him, "Brother, you are right. Because we know so little about chaos knowledge, we indeed need various methods to cross-verify the authenticity. I will now order the Astartes to have all the company's librarian units launch a series of fishing plans targeting the depths of the warp. I hope these small fry caught can bring some more positive influence to my continued hunt for the big fish, Vashtor." "Luo Sha, did you misunderstand something? I mean, Omegan, don't glare at me like that. Since I am a gene seed primarch, when facing various difficulties, I need to vigorously try all kinds of methods. So my choice is, I want them all. Thank you for your support. The Calamity Legion's flagship, the Gloriana-class battleship, Iron Fist." Inside the Primarch's private hall, under the bright lights, Lionel Johnson, with a gentle expression, and Omegan, with a tense face, both drove their power armors and sat at a metal round table. Just then, Luo Sha, with a sudden flip of his vibranium hand, slid 2 golden throne coins from the smooth, reflective tabletop towards the 2 Primarch brothers. He had previously mentioned the existence of golden throne coins and simulated training to Lionel Johnson and Omegan, so neither of them was surprised by this. After Luo Sha once again meticulously explained the simulated training and various taboos one by one, both Lionel Johnson and Omegan subconsciously picked up a golden throne coin and examined it carefully in front of their eyes. Subsequently, the three, having made all preparations, almost simultaneously tossed the golden throne coins into the air. Ding ding ding. Simulation starting. Current identities: Luo Sha, Space Wolves 13th Great Company Captain, Native Universe, Vormir. Luo Sha, Lord Cypher, Native Universe, Wakanda. Current companions: Lionel Johnson, Normal, Hydra Lord Omegan, Normal. Please select your landing identity and companions. If you refuse, you will land randomly. Refused to select identity, selected to land with companions. Simulation restarting. You are already in the Warhammer universe, and a random landing time and location will be chosen for you. Time. Location. You successfully landed deep within a cold void. You didn't even need to open your tightly closed eyes immediately. The cold and suffocation made you clearly perceive that your entire massive body was located within the harsh vacuum of space. You quickly made the correct response, rapidly covering your entire head with a skull helmet where countless living metals flowed back and forth. You subconsciously took a deep breath through your nose and mouth. Only then did you have the presence of mind to survey the unfamiliar surroundings. You did not see the familiar figures of Lionel Johnson or Omegan. You suddenly found yourself above 2 massive fleets engaged in a standoff. You immediately recognized one side as the main fleet of the Alpha Legion through the Legion insignia on the ship's armor, while the other side appeared to be the massive fleet of the White Scars Legion. At this moment, there was no conflict or exchange of fire between the 2 fleets. Instead, the Alpha Legion fleet was mirroring every movement of the White Scars Legion fleet perfectly. You activated the propulsion system inside your vibranium power armor without any hesitation. You also quickly shrouded your massive body in a large amount of dark shadow. You did not want to be heavily targeted by countless intense barrages from friendly fleets. Although this might not cause you much damage, the additional losses incurred were not something you wanted to see. Boom. Just a few minutes later, you, acting with extreme stealth, silently approached a White Scars Legion flagship, the Gloriana-class battleship, Blade Storm. Your magnetic boots quickly activated, and your entire massive body was firmly absorbed onto the incredibly thick ship armor. You rotated the skull helmet's eyepiece, looking around for a maintenance passage or landing deck that could lead inside the ship. You successfully drove your vibranium power armor to the entrance of a maintenance passage. You casually took out a vibranium power sword from your storage space and temporarily destroyed a sealed hatch at the entrance. You could not forcibly access the White Scars Legion's communication channel, nor did you have data codes that could prove your Primarch identity. To enter the ship, you could only resort to this last option. Bang! Your massive body quickly floated into the maintenance passage, and your two magnetic boots heavily absorbed onto the metal floor. After you passed through another sealed hatch, the incredibly familiar cold smell from inside the massive ship made you subconsciously exhale. Stand still. Who exactly are you? Just then, a low roar echoing through the surroundings suddenly came from behind you. You quickly drove your vibranium power armor to turn around, and immediately saw 5 Astartes wearing white power armor, each holding a bolter and a power glaive, aiming directly at you. Battle brothers, please do not misunderstand, this is a last resort. I am the Gene Seed Primarch of the Human Empire, Luo Sha, and also the brother of the Eagle of Shigoris. You slowly raised a vibranium hand towards the highly vigilant Astartes, speaking in a low voice. I demand to see your Legion Commander or Fleet Master. If Khan is also here, that would be even better. This unfamiliar Primarch, we can tentatively believe your words, but please put down your weapon, otherwise, a White Scars captain holding a power glaive said to you in a deep voice. You slightly lowered your head to check the power sword tightly held in your other vibranium hand. You casually inserted the vibranium power sword into the metal floor. This battle brother, it is yours now. You said faintly to him as you slowly lowered your skull helmet. At this moment, perhaps some of your facial features proved something, or perhaps your choice to put down your weapon earned you the most basic trust from everyone. The power glaives held tightly in the palm of each White Scar were no longer pointed in your direction, only the muzzles of the bolters occasionally swept across your exposed bronze-colored face. Immediately after, you were slowly escorted by 5 White Scars Astartes in a concealed manner towards the bridge hall. During this time, White Scars battle squads, quickly passing by you, also repeatedly examined your overall appearance as if they had seen an unexpected scene. Why are they looking at me like that? Am I ugly? You asked the White Scars captain holding the power glaive without turning your head. However, at this moment, the White Scars captain's immediate reply surprised you even more. My Lord Primarch, the reason they are so curious is because your current appearance bears some resemblance to Khan my lord in his youth. He said without any emotional fluctuation. Oh, is that so? How much do I resemble Khan? You subconsciously replied. At first glance, it's like you're his biological son. The White Scars captain hesitated for a moment, then replied to you with utmost honesty. Thank you all for your support. Khan's story should have been written earlier, but just like his role in the story, I forgot about it. As for the protagonist's appearance, it's purely for a thematic joke and for a future title. You didn't really take the White Scars captain's words to heart. You and Khan, as well as some of the White Scars, belong to the same race, so it's normal for your appearances to be somewhat similar. In the time that followed, you swiftly passed through one incredibly thick sealed bulkhead after another, gradually approaching the bridge hall. You also took the opportunity to see a large number of White Scars preparing for battle, as well as many heavy firepower weapons from the Great Crusade era. It seemed the prolonged standoff between the White Scars fleet and the Alpha Legion fleet had completely tensed everyone's nerves. Soon after, several burly Keshig guardsmen wearing Terminator power armor blocked all of you. However, one of the guardsmen first looked up at your massive 4.5-meter tall body, then repeatedly scrutinized your bronze-colored face. The other party allowed you to enter the bridge hall without any hesitation. At this moment, amidst countless busy mortal crewmen and shipboard thralls, you almost immediately saw the massive giant, nearly 4 meters tall, and the Primarch grade power armor, wildfire armor, worn on his robust body, which possessed both a wild aesthetic and powerful defensive capabilities. You also noticed that the Primarch grade power weapon named White Tiger Greatsword was securely hung at his waist, constantly reflecting an incredibly cold metallic glint. Although I've never heard of the Emperor having other sons, I sense the aura of more than one Primarch brothers from you, and the auras of Korax and Sanguinius are the strongest. Just then, the Hawk of Shigoris, White Scar's Primarch, Chagatai Khan, slowly turned his massive body, his incredibly deep and silent eyes fixated on your massive form. However, at this moment, you were also constantly observing his every move, even gradually frowning. No wonder the vast majority of White Scar's Astartes repeatedly examined your appearance. Because even you had to admit that some of the facial features of the White Scar's Primarch Chagatai Khan standing before you were too similar to your own. When you first looked, you even thought it was just a slightly older Primarch clone who had grown a beard and changed his hairstyle. Khan, my name is Luo Shah, the 22 gene seed Primarch cultivated by the Emperor 10,000 years later. You took a deep breath through your nose and slowly spoke to Chagatai Khan. You were quickly shaking off the many chaotic thoughts in the depths of your mind, striving to prove your Primarch identity to the Khan before you. I know, Yesuge, the chief stormseer of the White Scars, once warned me that I would encounter things far beyond imagination recently, but I didn't fully heed all of his psychic prophecies. The Khan, speaking slowly, gently waved his large hand at the White Scars standing around, motioning for those who planned to watch the show to temporarily leave the bridge hall. After all the Astartes had turned and left, the Khan immediately moved forward in his wildfire armor, coming directly before you. He first raised his hand and patted your thick vibranium shoulder plate, and a rare hint of joy seemed to appear in the depths of his incredibly profound eyes. However, the joy did not last long, and a dense, unresolvable gloom appeared on the Khan's entire face. Luo Shah, little brother, since you can travel against the flow of time and arrive here, does that mean most of the information I received earlier is true? Did the damned Horus really betray the Emperor and the human empire? As soon as the Khan finished speaking, you took a deep breath and informed the current Khan of more news and intelligence. Khan, the great betrayal incited by Horus has a far greater impact on the human empire than that. From a more macroscopic perspective, this is a fatal gamble between the Emperor and the 4 Chaos Gods. You probably know the dangers of the warp and chaos, so I won't say much more about it, because one of the core purposes of the entire rebellion is for the 4 Chaos Gods to make the great Emperor ascend to a Chaos God position in the high heavens at the cost of destroying the entire human empire and even the race. This is also one of the reasons why Horus, whose mind was blinded by the Chaos Gods, always clamored that the Emperor intended to abandon humanity and become a god alone. This is indeed true, but it is by no means the complete truth. Because the Chaos Gods never told Horus that they were the ones who orchestrated everything behind the scenes. Besides, you must have heard the news that Prospero was burned by the Wolf King Leman Russ, right? This is also a conspiracy from the Chaos Gods. Horus falsely transmitted the Emperor's decree, causing the Wolf King Leman Russ and Magnus to engage in a deathmatch. However, the Emperor and the future of humanity desperately need Magnus to be on our side. But from the current situation, even if I had joined that battle in the future, I wouldn't have successfully prevented the entire event from happening. At this moment, your low voice made the Khan's entire face as cold as frost. And when you listed the names of the many traitor Primarchs to the Khan one by one, his large hand was already tightly gripping the hilt of the White Tiger Greatsword. Come. Immediately notify the Spearhead Brotherhood and the Scimitar Brotherhood to prepare for boarding actions. At the same time, tell all the mortal captains and fleet masters to aim at the Alpha Legion fleet. I want to break their formation in one go. At this moment, you, Silent, could clearly sense a burning emotion called rage. deep within the Khan's massive body, as if it wanted to ignite everything. You were not surprised by this, because to your knowledge, among the many Primarch brothers, Khan actually had very few true friends. He didn't get along with many Primarchs, especially Mortarion, the Wolf King Leman Russ, and Fulgrim, among others. As for friends, Horus might have been one, but Horus seemed to get along well with everyone. If one were to talk about Khan's best friends and brothers, it seemed to be only Magnus and Sanguinius, with Magnus being his most intimate brother and friend. But now, his most intimate friend and brother had become the culprit who personally destroyed humanity's future and a traitor Primarch who betrayed the Emperor. How could Khan suppress the boiling rage in his chest? How to dispel sorrow? Only by killing. Thank you for your support. Chapter 1038 Iron Horse and Icy River enter a dream, Chagatai Khan 3. Between the Cold Warp, the White Scars fleet, which had maintained a defensive formation, rapidly entered a state of full-speed assault. Countless warp engines and overall structures, specially modified by the White Scars Legion, allowed them to achieve navigation speeds far exceeding those of other Legion fleets. Once the White Scars, Queen of Glory battleship, the Blade Storm flagship, also launched into super speed travel like an arrow from a bowstring, more White Scars ships immediately initiated a desperate, no-holds-barred charge toward the Alpha Legion's massive fleet. Innumerable laser arrays and brilliant lances of light instantly erupted in the Cold Warp, violently shaking the thick void shields outside every massive ship. At this very moment, you stood inside the bustling bridge hall, where countless mortal crewmen and servo-automatons were busy, witnessing everything unfold. With the tacit cooperation of the Khan himself, the fleet master, and countless mortal captains. The entire White Scars fleet, like a unified metal blade, forcefully inserted itself into the Alpha Legion's dense formation. In fact, facing such a swift White Scars fleet, even the Alpha Legion, which claimed to be capable of strategically countering any legion and was even more familiar with each legion's tactics, did not react immediately. And this temporarily presented the White Scars Astartes with an incredibly opportune moment for a counterattack. The next second, under your close observation, countless White Scars veterans clad in artificer power armor boarded ancient landing craft and launched boarding actions into various Alpha Legion ships. Following this, more members of the Black Keshig Guard, clad in black Terminator power armor, relied on the teleportation beacons carried by their battle brothers to launch teleportation assaults on the Alpha Legion's capital ships. However, when you instinctively retrieved the Dawnbreaker and the Blood Scythe from your inventory page, eager to join the boarding combat, the Khan, whose massive body stood before you, immediately activated his wildfire armor and raised his hand to stop you. Little brother, this is not our combat mission, this is the war glory of the White Scars, sons. But this is also not the sole purpose of our entire fleet's surprise assault, they are launching a feint. The Khan, his expression growing increasingly solemn, spoke to you gravely. No sooner had he finished speaking, you suddenly noticed among the countless holographic projections inside the bridge. When countless White Scars veterans and Black Keshig Guard successfully raided a series of Alpha Legion capital ships, they did not take the opportunity to launch deeper mopping up operations. Instead, they immediately used the teleportation beacons to teleport all Astartes back. Almost simultaneously, large numbers of Alpha Legion ships continuously fell into an extremely chaotic state of explosion, while the White Scars fleet's charging speed did not decrease but increased, even directly penetrating the Alpha Legion's long-planned defensive formation. It was at this moment that the Khan, who had just stopped you, slowly revealed to you. Even though he was incredibly furious because of the merciless betrayal of his Primarch brothers and the shattered future of humanity. He was always the gene father of the White Scars Legion. He believed that a Primarch's own emotions should never override the lives of his sons or the interests of the battlefield. He had already guessed that the Alpha Legion's presence was meant to slow down the White Scars. Therefore, they not only could not engage in any entanglement or prolonged combat with the enemy but instead needed to break through the enemy's encirclement in one fell swoop. And within this, there were likely some thoughts the Khan had to test your stance and actions. Even though you had already revealed a large amount of crucial information in battlefield developments to him, the Khan still harbored a trace of doubt about your true identity and origin. However, you, having fully understood, did not feel much anger about this. Because if you were in the Khan's position, you might be even more cautious. You slowly took a deep breath and asked the Khan, who stood before you, about the next objective. The Khan, his brows furrowed, hesitated for a moment before finally revealing his thoughts to you. Magnus had once been the Khan's closest and most important brother and friend. He would not completely abandon him based solely on your one-sided account. He wanted to lead the entire White Scars fleet to Prospero to personally witness the tragic battlefield and everything there. And you did not express any objection to this. In fact, you also wanted to know in advance what exactly happened on Prospero, and why, despite your influence, Magnus and Prospero still could not be successfully saved. Soon after, the White Scars fleet, whose navigation speed had not diminished in the slightest, quickly entered warp travel, beginning its rapid journey toward Prospero's location. And the Khan, perhaps to compensate for his slight suspicion of you just now, or simply to draw you closer to him, without any hesitation, led you into the Queen of Glory battleship, into a private trophy collection room belonging to the Primarch. At this moment, the Khan, activating his wildfire armor, suddenly waved his hand, pointing to countless ancient weapons and equipment hanging on metal walls or stored in transparent display cases, telling you to choose some as a gift for you, his little brother. And you did not stand on ceremony with him. You almost instantly spotted a heavy power glaive standing in a transparent display case. This long-handled weapon, whose sharp blade constantly shimmered with a pale green metallic luster, seemed to have an ancient legendary creature named Shigori's Blue Dragon, meticulously carved upon it by countless artisans. Little brother, this azure dragon glaive was forged together with my white tiger greatsword as a masterwork power weapon. It was also a precious gift presented to me by the artisans, great and small, of the entire planet to congratulate me after I became the Khan of Shigori's. Since you like it so much, I'll give it to you. The Khan, nodding slightly to you, casually opened the transparent display case in front of him, and personally handed the humming, vibrating azure dragon glaive to you. You took a deep breath, and a large vibranium hand immediately gripped the azure dragon glaive's metal hilt tightly. The next second, before you could make any defensive movements or combat stances, a low dragon's roar, echoing all around, seemed to flash in your and the Khan's ears. Clang clang. Thank you all for your support. Chapter 1039 Iron Horse, Frozen River, Entering Dreams, Chagatai Kant Part 4. Prospero, located in the Ultima Segmentum, was once a human world as precious as a ruby. In the past, under the meticulous care of the Crimson Magnus and the Thousand Sons, it not only housed vast knowledge from countless worlds and even Xenos races across the entire galaxy but was also the sole holy land in the hearts of countless psychers. However, when orbital bombardment, like a raging inferno, covered the entire land, and numerous pyramids and magnificent libraries storing countless precious knowledge collapsed and were destroyed, all that remained was a terrifying, charred, and scorching surface, with constantly swirling lightning and psychic power enveloping countless architectural ruins. In fact, even if you deeply understand the grave mistakes committed by the Crimson Magnus, and even if he was forced to stray into chaos due to this irreversible error, but solely regarding the destruction of Prospero, you would still choose to stand with Magnus and the Thousand Sons, and not with the Wolf King Lehman Russ and his space wolves. Because, in your view, what was destroyed on Prospero was never merely a gene seed Primarch who made a grave mistake, or even an Astartes legion. Instead, it was the enterprising spirit of pursuing endless knowledge and the curiosity of prying into all unknown things that were completely incinerated from the very soul of the human empire. From this moment on, the human race fell into an irreversible chronic death, though this death process was forcefully prolonged by the Emperor on the Golden Throne for tens of thousands of years. As time slowly passed, when White Scar's ships, massive in hull, successfully arrived at planet Prospero, The first thing that appeared in your and the Khan's field of vision was a desolate world permeated with chaos psychic power, countless flames, smoke, and charred ruins. At this moment, under your gaze, the seemingly expressionless Khan quickly issued a series of orders to the other ships. A large White Scar's fleet was immediately mobilized, encircling Prospero's low orbit so tightly that not even water could pass through, with countless light spear arrays and laser arrays already aimed at the terrifying, almost barren surface. And due to the repeated interference from countless shattered terrains and chaos psychic power, the detection instruments on any ship were unable to glimpse the true Prospero. So, after a discussion with the Khan, you both decided to venture onto Prospero's still hot surface. Buzz buzz buzz. Soon after, as a teleportation beacon deeply embedded itself into the surface, from which countless dust and Mars rose, you and the Khan arrived on Prospero, leading 12 key Shui Terminator Guard members. Looking around, through the skull helmet's eyepiece, you saw only countless smoldering, charred architectural ruins and massive smoke plumes extending like tentacles into the dark sky. You slightly lowered your gaze, and immediately saw countless pitiful mortal remains, already charred, their entire bodies curled up, as well as the 1,000 Sons Astartes who still stood upright on the surface, not yet fallen. Most of them were maintaining a stiff posture as if casting a spell, and some of the 1,000 Sons seemed to be undergoing flesh mutations, even after being scorched by high temperatures. Their horrifying appearance, merging with Chaos Demon, could be seen. There were also a few scattered 1,000 Sons Astartes who seemed to be covering and directing the evacuation of countless mortal psychers, but the large-scale orbital bombardment from the space wolves gave these innocent lives no chance of survival. I detected a large number of nuclear explosions, some successfully deployed virus bombs, and continuous orbital bombardment. It seems the Wolf King Leman Russ and his space wolves truly live up to the title of the Emperor's executioners. They indeed have no humanity or mercy. At this moment, the Khan, whose massive body was illuminated by lightning amidst countless dark clouds, said to you in a calm tone. You, stepping forward in your vibranium power armor, heard no sarcasm in his tone, as if he was not mocking the Wolf King, but merely stating a simple, straightforward fact. And you, knowing far more inside information and truth than the current Khan, said nothing more. After all, pale words and truth often cannot replace the strong impact of the cruel reality before you. To some extent, were the actions of the Wolf King Leman Russ and the Space Wolves wrong? Most likely, they were not. The only mistake was that the Wolf King Leman Russ, who usually had a meticulous side despite his rough demeanor, never doubted the series of orders issued by Horus. If he had consulted with Magnus or the Emperor beforehand, or listened to Valder's advice, it undoubtedly could have avoided many subsequent difficulties and problems. From another perspective, standing from the position of Magnus and the 1,000 Sons, did they make mistakes? From a practical standpoint, they certainly made many wrong choices. But even if Magnus, misled by Tzeentch, accidentally caused the Emperor and the entire future of humanity to fail, if he had the courage to take all responsibility, and even when the Wolf King Leman Russ arrived, actively admitted his mistakes, would the Wolf King Leman Russ have continued to execute the order to kill Magnus in front of countless of his sons and the Custodian Guard Commander Valder? Perhaps yes, perhaps no, but if all of the above had happened, then no matter what, there would still have been room for redemption. But now, it seems all things were fated. Especially under the meticulous planning of the Chaos Gods, the Wolf King's overly wild and unbridled personality traits were completely incompatible with Magnus's spineless and cowardly nature, and under a series of coincidences and covert instigations, this ultimately led to the tragic outbreak of the burning of Prospero. Just then, the Khan's low voice temporarily interrupted your somewhat scattered thoughts. He ordered the 12 key Shui Terminators to search for underground passages within the city to see if any survivors could be found. And after you and the Khan exchanged glances, you each drew your Azure Dragon Glaive and White Tiger Greatsword, and immediately activated your power armor, searching back and forth through the countless smoldering architectural ruins and layers of smoke for any remaining traces of the battlefield. It was then that you and the Khan actually saw countless illusory and blurred shattered souls of 1,000 Sons Astartes, Slowly wandering among the ruins of this destroyed city, they either walked mechanically with blank movements or couldn't help but let out faint, ethereal cries. This undoubtedly made Prospero, with its ceaseless flames and rising smoke, seem like a terrifying purgatory descended upon the world. Thank you all for your support. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Just then, a continuous buzzing sound faintly reached your ears. These sounds in the swirling dust seemed to come and go, at times close enough to touch, yet at other times as far as the horizon. You slightly turned your skull helmet and noticed that even the Khan standing beside you had heard these strange noises. He quickly made a combat gesture to raise your guard and vigilance. You slowly took a deep breath, focusing all your attention on the present reality. Instinctively, you gripped the azure dragon glaive, which was far superior in quality and weight, and a faint azure light seemed to flash across its sharp blade. Thump, thump, thump. The next second, the Khan, wielding the white tiger greatsword, swiftly propelled his wildfire armor, charging forward at a speed far exceeding that of other Primarchs. You immediately followed his broad back with your gaze, trying to pinpoint the source of those strange sounds. Then, among countless architectural ruins, you saw flickering, ethereal warp-evil entities with insectoid carapaces covering their entire bodies, comparable in size to mortals, Prospero's psych-phage wasps. Khan, be careful. That thing is a psych-phage wasp, an evil entity that preys on psychers. You immediately shouted to the Khan, who was brandishing his white tiger greatsword back and forth. You also swiftly propelled your vibranium power armor into a fierce charge forward. The azure dragon glaive, gripped tightly in your hands, slashed out streaks of brilliant azure light through the harsh air filled with smoke and sparks. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. In an instant, the psych-phage wasps, with their unpredictable flight paths, found it difficult to withstand your and the Khan's exceptionally skilled attacks. As soon as they flapped their large elytra, attempting to launch dive attacks on you, they were inevitably defeated in the dense onslaught presented jointly by the white tiger greatsword and the azure dragon glaive. However, the reason psych-phage wasps are considered by many scholars to be one of the most threatening warp-evil entities is because once they appear, their numbers are never small, and they will not give up until their goal is achieved. Buzz, buzz, buzz. At this moment, dozens of massive psych-phage wasp carcasses had not yet fully landed when hundreds, even thousands, of psych-phage wasps emerged, swaying, from deeper within the ruins of more buildings. You and the Khan quickly exchanged glances through your helmet visors. You swiftly abandoned your offensive stance and vigorously propelled your power armor, performing agile leaps and dodges into the surrounding building ruins. Almost simultaneously, the quick-thinking Khan also issued a combat assembly order to the 12 key Shui Terminators scattered nearby, instructing them to immediately regroup with the two of you. Rumble, rumble, rumble. However, just as the two of you, Primarchs, were about to successfully rendezvous with the heavily armed key Shui Terminator guard, the scorched ground beneath your and the Khan's feet suddenly began to tremble continuously with booming sounds. This seemed to be an earthquake, an induced seismic reaction of the thick crust that had undergone extensive orbital bombardment and prolonged high-temperature scorching. In a flash of lightning, you saw all the surface plates beneath your and the Khan's feet rapidly shattering and collapsing, even forming a massive, seemingly bottomless, pitch-black hole with a diameter of several kilometers. You took a deep breath. The moment your massive body began to fall, you immediately activated the jet system inside your vibranium power armor. You also suddenly extended a vibranium hand and grabbed the Khan, who was also falling beside you. Buzz, buzz, buzz. But at this moment, the large number of psych-phage wasps swirling freely in the dark sky and above the smoldering debris seemed to have detected your presence through the collapsing roar. Without any hesitation, they launched a deafening, rapid flight towards your location. You quickly took over from the Khan and issued an order to temporarily take cover to the 12 key Shui Terminator guard who were attempting to provide suppressive fire on the psych-phage wasp swarm. You Primarchs have a way to solve the current problem. There is no need for the Astartes scions to pay the price of death for this. At this moment, you slightly lowered your head and briefly communicated with the Khan below. The two of you instantly decided to lure these psych-phage wasps to fly deeper into this seemingly bottomless underground cave, and then you would seize the opportunity to find a combat method or an escape route to deal with the psych-phage wasps. Just dozens of seconds later, hundreds, even thousands, of psych-phage wasps were about to completely surround you and the Khan. But you, fearless, began a rapid aerial descent deep into the underground cave. In an instant, countless psych-phage wasps, like cruise missiles, followed your movements, rapidly flying deeper into the underground cave where the light was fading. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. At the same time, countless pitch-black shadow power wriggled and spread across the surface of your massive body, emitting waves of terrifying psionic fluctuations. You wanted to eliminate these incredibly troublesome warp evil entities all at once. Boom, boom, boom. However, at this moment, the previously dark and silent depths of the underground cave also emitted waves of incredibly powerful and terrifying psionic fluctuations. The next second, streaks of forcibly released psionic flames quickly formed a sizable firestorm in midair, and almost instantly, they completely incinerated countless relentlessly entangled psych-phage wasps into ashes scattered across the sky. You and the Khan did not even have time to feel any surprise. A low voice, filled with weariness and confusion, sounded in your ears. You've finally arrived, my brothers. Several breaths later, your and the Khan's massive bodies landed heavily at the very bottom of the underground cave, the edges of your magnetic boots splashing more scattered ashes and faint smoldering sparks. Within your and the Khan's helmet visors, a massive figure, flickering and ethereal like a psych-phage wasp, yet shattered and transparent like countless thousand suns' souls, stood on the ground. What exactly are you? The Khan, casually raising his white tiger greatsword, asked the other party with extreme vigilance. And you let out a fleeting sigh from between your mouth and nose. The azure dragon glaive, held tightly in your massive palm, lowered a few inches. A mere remnant, or perhaps a dream left behind by some destructive event. In the end, matter, thought, energy, these things don't seem to be all that different, do you agree, Brother Luo Shah? The massive ethereal figure said, nodding thoughtfully in your direction. Long time no see, or perhaps we just met. Brother Magnus, you said faintly to the last remaining fragment of Magnus's good soul. Hearing your conversation with Magnus's kind soul, the Khan seemed to make no movement, and even the whirring of his breathing valve was obscured by the subtle hum emanating from within his wildfire armor. You are not Magnus at all. The Khan, who had been silent for a long time, suddenly spoke. Perhaps not entirely, but one undeniable point is that I seem to share a soul with him, Khan, that is the key, the soul. Magnus's kind soul slowly placed an incredibly ethereal hand in front of him, examining it repeatedly, and he said with a hint of sorrow in his voice. I can even see your soul within your body, still as impatient and enraged as before. Brother, I never thought I would see you again. Hearing the other party's words, the Khan seemed to fall silent once more. Magnus, what exactly happened here? You took a deep breath and asked Magnus's kind soul. Haha, brother, are you asking the obvious? Oh, I understand, the current you is not the past you. The space wolves have arrived, bringing with them our father's wrath, countless sisters, and the custodian guard Captain Valder, and of course, our other Primarch brother, the Wolf King Lehman Russ. To be honest, although his fighting style is different from usual, his finishing moves are still clean and decisive, at least I have personally experienced this. Magnus's kind soul, completely different from the red-eyed Ogren in your impression, said lightly with a hint of humor and sarcasm. Ah, and you, my brother, you are like a headless fly, trying to mediate between everyone. You led a large number of fanatical sisters and my children into continuous conflicts with the space wolves. You even allied with Valder to initiate a brotherly duel against the Wolf King Lehman Russ. You seemed to want to save me and my children, but you did not succeed. But this is not your fault, my brother, even a Primarch cannot resist the torrent of fate. At this moment, Magnus's kind soul suddenly fixed his gaze on the Khan's massive body, and he slowly spoke to the other party like a calm older brother. Khan, you are right, you have always been right. I inadvertently made an irreversible mistake against my father and even the human empire, which is the real reason for the wolves' arrival. Do you remember what you warned me about on Ullanor before I set off for Nicaea? I should have listened to your advice then, but my arrogance and hubris prevented me from ever listening to any of my brothers, instead preferring others to listen to me, which is undoubtedly a regrettable thing. Magnus, you must make one thing clear. The Khan, whose voice was low and hoarse, asked again. This time, even you seemed to clearly sense the profound sorrow gradually emanating from the other party. Khan, just as you said, I should have disciplined my children, but I failed to do so. You never made those dirty deals I did, so your legion does not need to compromise with any existence, but all deals are on a superficial level. The truth is we were completely deceived. All of us were kept in the dark. The high heavens, like an abyss, have never shown mercy to any existence. Those terrifying beings known as the Chaos Gods conspired against us. You, I, our children, countless mortals are all on their chessboard. The stronger the soul of anything, the greater the danger that comes with it. Our eldest brother, Horus, is the most powerful soul among all Primarchs, so his fall was also the most severe in speed and intensity. Khan, if you still haven't understood, then I will tell you more clearly. Horus has been completely devoured by the warp. His body is filled with terrifying power from the Chaos Gods, and these powers are corrupting his will from the depths of his soul, gnawing at everything within him from the inside. He is no longer the Horus we knew. And he is not the only case. There are more fallen ones, such as the most damned Erebus, and one of our Primarch brothers, Lorgar. However, do you know what the most tragic point is? Although Horus suffered great corruption from the Chaos Gods, in the end, everything was his own choice. He cannot use the fall of others as a shield. Because no one else can even compare to Horus's brilliance. At this moment, even if only a remnant of Magnus's kind soul stood before you, he still involuntarily revealed an uncontrollable excitement and remorse. You had no intention of speaking, as you seemed to be deeply pained by Magnus's words as well. Even though you had mentally prepared yourself for apotheosis due to the difficult future situation and various factors. But rather than apotheosis, it was more like actively choosing to fall and compromise with chaos. How much difference is there really between the current you and the past Horus? Thump, thump, thump. Just then, as you fell into deep thought, the Khan, whose massive body seemed to be enveloped in profound sorrow, instinctively drove his wildfire armor forward. His gaze, through his helmet's eye slits, fixed on Magnus's kind soul nearby, and he said in an incredibly low voice. Magnus, my brother, how can I save you? However, before the Khan could finish his words, Magnus, whose ethereal red face faintly showed a gentle smile, slowly shook his head. It's too late, brother, everything is too late. However, because of your arrival, I want to use my last strength to make a final struggle before death. Magnus's kind soul first said in a deep voice to the Khan, and then the smiling figure suddenly turned his incredibly ethereal gaze and fixed it on your direction. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. In an instant, Magnus's kind soul suddenly transformed into a large mass of writhing crimson energy, which rapidly surged towards your massive body. The incredibly swift Khan immediately wielded the white tiger greatsword tightly clutched in his hand, attempting to block the omnipresent crimson energy, but found his attacks utterly powerless. At this moment, you, who were rapidly activating your dark shadow power, were heavily enveloped by a large amount of crimson energy from Magnus. Your entire brain felt like it was screaming. Countless ancient knowledge and secrets about the nature of psychic power or witchcraft were poured into the depths of your mind. Your massive body couldn't help but kneel on the ground. Every inch of your flesh, encased within the vibranium power armor, was twitching and trembling, and even your skin color faintly took on a reddish hue. You could clearly feel an unparalleled powerful force coursing and flowing freely through your bloodline. Some blurry, illusory scenes seemed to appear before your eyes. Next to an unknown planet suspended deep in the cold void, a one-eyed, 100-armed giant, whose size could no longer be calculated by data, with incredibly rough, blood-red skin that gleamed with a metallic luster, and thick arms extending across the void from its broad back, was coldly staring down. Your blurred consciousness reacted instantly. What you were receiving was a part of the warp essence that originally belonged to Magnus. You never thought that Magnus, who had always been at odds with you, would be so generous, or perhaps, Magnus, devoid of his kind soul, was ultimately just a puppet of the Chaos Gods. This is my last gift, little brother, please use it well. If possible, the next time we meet, let me leave with a little more dignity. At this moment, Magnus's kind soul's low voice suddenly echoed deep within your hazy consciousness. You were just about to say something to him. However, Magnus's kind soul fell silent, as if it had returned to the vast sea of souls. The next second, you slowly opened your tightly closed eyes. Reflected in your visors was Khan's face, filled with anxiety and sadness. Brother, what did Magnus do to you? Were you hurt? Khan asked you in a low voice. You immediately activated your vibranium power armor to stand up, and gently shook your head at Khan. You revealed Magnus's kind soul's gift to Khan. And Khan, after letting out a sigh, slowly put his metal helmet back on his head. This is what the Magnus the First knew would do, but from today on, my closest friend and little brother died here. At this moment, Khan, seemingly unable to suppress his grief, slowly turned his wildfire armor, and let out mournful ancient chants into the depths of the empty underground cave, as if continuously mourning Magnus's passing. Not long after, you and Khan returned to the desolate surface, filled with smoldering wreckage and rising smoke. When the 12 Qi Shui Terminator Guard members found your tracks again, you and Khan unexpectedly saw 1,000 Suns Astartes wearing golden painted power armor in the team. According to his self-introduction, the person was Sergeant Aveda of the 4th Company of the 1,000 Suns Legion. He was teleported here after Prospero was burned. Otherwise he might not have survived the large-scale orbital bombardment and fierce battle. You and Khan had accomplished your purpose in coming to Prospero, and you decided to lead Sergeant Aveda and the others to leave this place. However, when the Qi Shui Terminator Guard began to send communication calls to the Gloriana-class battleship, Blade Storm, orbiting in near-planet orbit, intending to evacuate, they found that they could not get any response from the fleet. Almost at the same time, you, who were wrapping a teleportation beacon with countless shadow power, instantly discovered the severe situation of teleportation failure. Khan, something might have happened within the White Scars fleet, either an external attack, or a major problem within the Legion. You said to Khan, who was looking up, with a solemn expression. I know, so we must return to the top immediately, otherwise I'm afraid there will be great chaos within the fleet. And the White Scars Legion is the only powerful support I can bring to the Emperor and the Empire, it cannot be lost. Khan, whose expression gradually became solemn, said to you in a low voice. He was now like a terrifying volcano about to erupt, with countless long accumulated fury brewing deep within his chest. You took a deep breath and slightly shook your skull helmet. You could not return to the bridge via the teleportation beacon for now, and using heavy flying vehicles would easily be locked onto by the numerous turrets of the main warships, becoming conspicuous targets. Everyone in your heart assumed that a large number of traitors had appeared within the White Scars Legion, and more caution was needed. It was at this moment that an extremely risky and absurd method slowly emerged in your mind. You immediately flipped your giant palm, and a series of native Terra hoverbikes with metallic luster instantly appeared before everyone. Before Khan, who faintly let out a surprised sound, could ask you about the specific principle. Your giant palm flipped again, and the powerful artifact from the Frost Giant, a cold ice treasure box the size of a human head, slowly appeared in your palm. Come on, Khan, let's experience what speed and passion are together. You slightly turned your skull helmet and said to Khan, who was standing beside you. And Khan, after the initial shock, a slightly low laugh and an incomparably heroic aura seemed to return to his massive body. Haha, little brother, I like your idea. Khan shouted to you in a deep voice. The next second, with increasingly swift movements, he activated his wildfire armor and leapt onto a hoverbike, and the incredibly powerful engine roar completely resounded all around. One by one, the Qi Shui Terminator Guard members also jumped onto the hoverbikes, skillfully checking the specific status of the motorcycle engines. After Aveda from the Thousand Suns Legion also carefully sat in the driver's seat of a hoverbike. Yu, whose massive body was rapidly rising with countless black shadow power, instantly transformed into an incredibly huge shadow raven. And deep within one of your sharp talons, the native artifact, the Cold Ice Treasure Box, was continuously releasing an endless stream of frosty aura into the surrounding turbid air. Looking out, countless continuous frosty auras were rapidly condensing into a frozen sky road leading to the sky above. Boom! Your shadow giant raven, formed from countless dark shadow power, is soaring through the dark skies of Prospero. Not far behind you, a massive frozen sky road, rapidly condensed from a continuous stream of ice and frost, is constantly appearing along your flight path. Even more surprisingly, numerous hoverbikes with roaring engines are being driven skillfully by Khan and all the Keshig guards, moving wildly as if on flat ground along this incredibly dangerous and increasingly thrilling frozen sky road. At this moment, you are escaping the remaining wreckage and ruins of Prospero by means beyond imagination. Soon after, when this enormous frozen sky road, continuously spreading across the sky, forcibly pierced through the incredibly thick dark clouds like a crystal sword reflecting faint light. Under the illumination of a brilliant star, you and Khan immediately saw the conspicuous explosion flares constantly erupting from each main battleship in the depths of the cold void, as well as 4 Death Guard Legion main battleships rapidly approaching outside the fleet formation. In a way, your previous conjectures and thoughts with Khan were not far off. However, the only thing you didn't expect was not only the unexpected appearance of traitors within the White Scars Legion, but also an external pincer attack from the rebel legions. At this moment, your shadow giant raven form, bravely flapping its massive wings, once again accelerated its flight speed. When everyone completely escaped Prospero's gravitational pull and entered the cold void, even the countless icy auras released from the Cold Ice Treasure Box seemed to receive some kind of boost, and the speed of condensing into a frozen sky road greatly increased. Bang, bang, bang. Before long, numerous silent hoverbikes swiftly penetrated an incredibly thick void shield, successfully arriving on the outer deck of the Queen of Glory class battleship, Blade Storm. Looking around, countless brilliant sparks flew as the hoverbikes landed heavily and collided with the thick deck. Khan, who had casually drawn the White Tiger greatsword from the waist of his wildfire armor, swiftly jumped off the now useless hoverbike, his magnetic boots firmly adhering to the metal deck. And you instantly transformed from your special shadow giant raven form back into your towering human form. One of your large hands held the Cold Ice Treasure Box, which was slowly emitting an icy aura, and in your other hand, you had re-gripped the Azure Dragon glaive you had just extracted. In an instant, the Keshig Guard members, driving their Terminator armor, immediately found the repair engineering passage that led into the ship. However, just as you and Khan were about to enter the ship directly to swiftly eliminate the large number of White Scars traitors. As vibrant mist permeated the cold void, a massive figure, completely enveloped in green power armor, descended with a crash before you and Khan. And from the breathing mask covering most of his pale face and the scythe of annihilation tightly held in his massive hand, it was clear that he was the Gene Seed Primarch of the Death Guard, Mortarion. "Ah, I never thought I'd see you here again, my dear Luo Sha little brother, do you know how much I've missed you?" Mortarion's heavy breathing sound seemed to break the taboo of the cold void, successfully reaching your and Khan's ears. "Perhaps it's our destiny, Mortarion. Tell me, how does it feel to be a Chaos lackey for the first time? You used to complain about the Emperor's various dissatisfactions with you, so when you're completely leashed, who can you blame? Your sons? Or perhaps Typhus, Lord of the Death Guard? You inversely hung the Cold Ice Treasure Box on the waist of your vibranium power armor, gripping the humming Azure Dragon glaive with both hands. You unrestrainedly offered Mortarion a warm greeting between Primarch brothers. However, at this moment, Mortarion, who had heavily struck the handle of his scythe of annihilation, seemed to forcefully control the raging anger within his massive body. He slightly shifted his cold gaze and spoke in a deep voice to Khan, who had just raised his white tiger greatsword. My Primarch brother, the great Chagatai Khan, our elder brother Horus is waiting for you to join us. Become one of us, and let us together establish a new empire without the Emperor, an empire that is completely free and unconstrained. In this coming new world, our Astartes' sons will be the leaders of all mortals, the strong will remain strong, and the weak can only obey guidance and commands. Mortarian's words had just fallen. Khan, who subtly snorted through his nose, spoke in a deep voice. It's a pleasure, Lord of Death. However, listen carefully to what you're saying. Has the corruption of chaos destroyed your mind too? I even doubted for a moment that you weren't an envoy sent by Horus. Heh, Khan brother, you're right about one thing, I indeed have another purpose here. When Horus and the Emperor both suffer losses in the future, perhaps we can do something more advantageous. Hearing Khan's doubts, Mortarion slowly revealed his true purpose. I can tell you clearly, more than half of the Astartes within your White Scars Legion are members of a society sympathetic to Horus's ideals. Now you either choose to become part of the new order, or you can only become a dead man for me to mourn. At this moment, the low words from Mortarion, Lord of Death, echoed repeatedly in your and Khan's ears. But neither you nor Khan showed any retreat or hesitation. Especially Khan, who had just experienced the passing of his close friend Magnus, slowly released the long-accumulated anger from the depths of his heart. Mortarion, this is the last time I will call you brother. Perhaps in the eyes of you traitors, the human empire that our father, the Emperor, built with the sacrifices of countless mortals and Astartes is worthless, like a pile of dog excrement. But in my heart, you who betrayed humanity and the Emperor are worse than dog excrement. Thank you for your support. Chapter 1044, Iron Horse, Icy River, Entering Dreams, Chagatai Khan, Ix. Boom boom boom. At this moment, the Khan, whose angry roar faintly echoed within his metal helmet, suddenly activated his wildfire armor, launching an incredibly swift charge towards Mortarion with a reaction speed far exceeding his. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Amidst the lightning-fast movement, the white tiger greatsword, tightly gripped in the Khan's hands, also seemed to emit a tiger's roar from the depths of its wielder's heart, then mercilessly chopped down towards the silent Mortarion. Clang! Mortarion's respirator spewed out a cloud of turbid poison gas, and he swiftly raised the scythe silence, held in both hands, above his head, colliding with the imposing white tiger greatsword and producing a deafening, terrifying sound. However, the Khan, whose fighting style prioritized extreme speed, immediately adjusted his next attack posture the moment the white tiger greatsword was successfully blocked. The white tiger greatsword, carrying an unstoppable killing aura, swiftly swept horizontally towards Mortarion's waist. Boom! In an instant, the scythe silence in Mortarion's palms dropped downwards, choosing to stand its incredibly hard metal handle beside him, effortlessly blocking the white tiger greatsword's fierce attack. But the agile and flexible Khan did not give Mortarion any more opportunities to counterattack. One of his magnetic boots instantly lifted upwards, then, carrying a powerful physical force, it forcefully kicked Mortarion's entire massive body hundreds of meters away. Boom boom boom. However, an attack of this magnitude was nothing to Mortarion, who had already devoted himself to Father Nurgle. He didn't even make a sound, yet he forcefully activated his unharmed barbarous armor, wielding the scythe silence, and returned to the Khan's front. Following this, the Death Lord, Mortarion, who remained silent, launched increasingly powerful and fierce attacks, forcing the Khan to jump and dodge back and forth. The Khan even, in a brief moment of counter-maneuvering, had Mortarion's scythe silence heavily graze his chest and abdomen, leaving a clearly visible, terrifying scar on the thick armor of his wildfire armor. Boom boom boom. It was at this moment that you, having just commanded over a dozen key Shui Terminators and the 1,000 Sons Astartes into the ship's passage, immediately turned your skull helmet. The next second, your magnetic boots instantly performed a shadow step, and with a movement speed far exceeding both the Khan and Mortarion, you joined this chaotic battle between Primarch brothers. Rumble. At this moment, the Azure Dragon Glaive, tightly gripped in your hands, swiftly cut through the cold void filled with vibrant mist. Its faintly glowing sharp blade carried a faint dragon's roar, heavily chopping down onto Mortarian's massive body. Mortarian, whose reactions were not slow at all, first suddenly increased the attack force of the scythe's silence against the Khan, forcing his massive body to retreat several steps. Immediately after, he suddenly swung the scythe's silence swiftly from the side of his body, heavily striking the side of the descending azure dragon glaive. But at the same time, the white tiger greatsword from the Khan, once again carrying the roar of a fierce tiger, swept heavily across Mortarian's massive body. PFF'd. In a flash, even though Mortarian had completely disrupted the azure dragon glaive's attack trajectory with the scythe's silence, forcing you to quickly make your next attack judgment, the Khan's white tiger greatsword deeply embedded itself into the depths of Mortarian's power armor's chest and abdomen. However, to the Khan's surprise, Mortarian, despite suffering a fierce blow, seemed to feel no pain from the injuries. Instead, he seized the opportunity to swing the scythe's silence, held in both hands, sending the Khan flying with a crash, while also inflicting some real injuries on the Khan's massive body. Khan, the Chaos Master Mortarian pledged allegiance to controls a portion of the Chaos Authority over life force, so most fatal melee attacks no longer have much effect on him. You relayed Mortarian's little secret to the Khan, who was flying backward, without turning your head. Wisps of dark shadow power began to rise from the surface of your massive body, as if shrouding your entire being in a flickering veil of shadow. The psychic knowledge infused into you by Magnus's benevolent soul was gradually proving to be of great use. It also made your reaction speed, whether in mobilizing shadow power or operating shadow power, incredibly swift. So, my little brother, you have made your choice. At this moment, Mortarian, who had been silent for a long time, suddenly spoke his last low words to the charging Khan. He even drove his barbarous armor to bend slightly, offering a highly sarcastic doffing of the hat to the Khan, who had halted his heavy footsteps beside you. Buzz buzz buzz. The next second, Mortarian's massive body was completely enveloped in the light of the teleportation beacon, disappearing entirely from your and the Khan's line of sight. At this moment, you also noticed that some of the main White Scar's fleet ships had successfully shaken off the internal rebellion's influence and were heavily besieging and fiercely attacking the Death Guard Legion's ships. It seems Mortarian doesn't want his fleet to suffer any mishaps, especially after he determined it would be difficult for him to win a 2-on-1 fight, you said in a low voice to the Khan, who had picked up his white tiger greatsword with a backhand. Little brother, I suddenly have a very strong premonition that the battle between Mortarian and me will eventually determine life and death. The Khan said slowly to you, his metal helmet unmoving. However, just as you were about to tell the Khan some intelligence and information about the Terra battlefield, a series of explosions and tremors from the rear bridge position made you and the Khan react once more. For now, the more dangerous Mortarian and the Death Guard had temporarily withdrawn from the battlefield, but the rebellion within the White Scar's Legion had not yet ended. Khan, should we leave any of these traitors alive? If not, our subsequent extermination operation will be much simpler. Your huge hand gripped the azure dragon glaive, and you asked in a deep voice. Brother, let's keep them alive for now. I want to clearly ask where I, their gene father, wronged them, to make them so loyal to Horus. The Khan said to you with an incredibly cold tone. Thank you for your support. GW is always stirring things up. It turns out the Emperor wasn't about to become the Dark King. Instead, he himself is the Dark King, but he just likes to role play in human skin and has become addicted to it. The Emperor is obsessed with the real universe, and the Chaos Gods are worried. Moreover, this statement undoubtedly brings the mystery of the Emperor's origin back, to some extent, to the shaman summoning theory of many years ago. To some extent, there has always been a significant gap between the pure-blooded Terra-born Astartes and the Astartes from various Legion home worlds. This gap, stemming from regional discrimination, was not obvious in the early and middle stages of the Great Crusade, but it became more pronounced as the Great Crusade entered its later stages. Especially after Horus became the War Master, this pre-existing gap became a major contradiction that gradually tore apart every legion. Not only White Scars, but Raven Guard also experienced similar issues, and even the secret origin of the Dark Angels arose from this. Currently, Khan Tolan, who is leading a group of White Scars traders in a continuous assault on the Gloriana-class battleship, Bladestorm, is a classic example of this. As one of the rebel leaders, he was born on Terra. From the day he unexpectedly learned about the Astartes, he dreamed of becoming a member of the Shadow Wolves and harbored deep admiration for the Shadow Wolves' Primarch, Horus. However, despite Khan Tolan's grand ideals and ambitions, issues with his combat quality and factors like Astartes' troop allocation led to his direct transfer to the understaffed White Scars Legion, completely shattering his dream of joining Horus's legion. Although Khan Tolan eventually found his place in the White Scars Legion and even changed his name to Tolan, he never lost his deep-seated admiration and reverence for Horus. If it were just that, it wouldn't be a big deal. After all, countless Astartes increasingly worshipped Horus due to his personal charisma, coupled with the Emperor's repeated efforts to establish a Primarch role model and promote Horus's succession to the Warmaster position. But when this deeply ingrained worship gradually led to the establishment of numerous secret warrior societies, and then unexpectedly combined with factors like Horus inciting rebellion, the past instability quickly transformed into a ticking time bomb buried deep within all legions. From the perspective of these Terra-born veterans alone, they did not believe they were engaging in an unforgivable rebellion. Instead, they believed they were choosing the correct stance for their Gene Father and planning a more enlightened and prosperous future for their battle brothers who fought alongside them. However, they intentionally or unintentionally forgot a more crucial point. All the honor and power they currently possessed came from the Emperor and the Empire's strong cultivation. Without these, they were, in fact, worthless. Rumble. At this moment, a large number of Terra-born White Scars veterans from the Moonlight Brotherhood were launching continuous fierce attacks on the Loyalist boarding parties surrounding the bridge hall. Countless bolters and heavy firepower weapons flew back and forth in the middle of the passage, and power weapons emitting disintegration fields constantly hacked at their former battle brothers. Khan Shiban, let your Storm Brotherhood Astartes surrender. You have no chance of victory. My Lord Hakasi has successfully occupied the bridge hall, and only by aligning with my Lord Horus is the only way to uphold the Empire and justice. Khan Tolan's low voice quickly transmitted through the gaps of countless exploding bolters to a group of boarding troops stubbornly resisting. Tolan, I am ashamed to be associated with you. You and I were once battle brothers, but now you are just a traitor. A traitor forever. Khan Shiban, with wide, furious eyes, wielded a power glaive, striking down a traitor wearing Terminator power armor onto the metal floor with a fierce, sweeping attack. In an instant, the long handle of the power glaive sharply changed direction, plunging deep into the fallen Terminator's helmet eye socket, completely ending his life. Boom. However, at this moment, an incredibly precise bolter strike caused Khan Shiban, who had just won a battle, to stumble back several steps. Countless Dao steel armor fragments flew outwards, making clattering sounds. Buzz buzz buzz. In the nick of time, an incredibly thick psychic shield temporarily enveloped Khan Shiban's burly body, temporarily relieving him of the ensuing bolter threat. The great Chagatai Khan and little Khan Luo Shah have successfully returned to the flagship. You damned traitors, surrender now. Just then, behind the traitor forces, Chief Storm Seer Khan Yesuge, radiating terrifying psychic fluctuations, quickly led dozens of Qi Shui Terminators and the Soul Thousand Sons Astartes, blocking the only retreat route for the countless traitors. As a result, the countless loyalist Astartes struggling under the pincer attack and a large number of furious mortal crew members suddenly let out a roar that echoed all around, launching a fierce, unyielding counterattack against the offensive positions the traitors had just established. A considerable portion of the White Scars traitors defending inside the bridge hall also learned the significant news that Khan and Yu had returned, and even gradually realized that the battlefield situation was deteriorating beyond recovery. After the large number of boarding troops led by Khan Shiban and Khan Yesuge launched a swift pincer attack. Khan Tolan, his solemn face gradually turning pale, had no choice but to temporarily put down his power weapon and bolter, leading his considerably wounded traitor battle brothers to become prisoners. And the successfully converged Khan Shiban and Khan Yesuge immediately led the morale-boosted forces in an even fiercer assault on the bridge hall. Thump thump thump. Almost simultaneously, you and the rapidly charging Khan were repeatedly charging deep within the ranks of a group of White Scar's traitors. Any Astartes, regardless of their combat power, was no match for a single blow from you Primarchs. Even a Qi Shui Terminator wearing Terminator power armor was easily sent flying by the blunt side of your Azure Dragon glaive. After more than 10 minutes, when you and Khan could no longer see any standing White Scar's traitors within your field of vision, Khan, striding forward menacingly, driving his wildfire armor, reached out and lifted a White Scar's traitor with a shattered helmet and congealed blood spewing from his mouth, bringing him before him. My child, tell me who is the commander and instigator of this rebellion, and I may consider pardoning your death sentence. Khan, suppressing his anger, spoke earnestly to his son. Father, did we really make a mistake? The White Scar's traitor, swallowing congealed blood, seemed to unconsciously reveal a bitter smile. Enough. The masterminds of the rebellion are Khan Hakasi Noyan, Khan Tolan, and also Khan Gar and Khan Exabu, who were more closely aligned with Horus, and many more Terra-born White Scar's veterans. Then, can you tell me, what was all this for? For Horus. Khan, raising his hand to remove his metal helmet, revealed a weathered face filled with sorrow. He quietly asked the White Scar's traitor held in midair. I don't know. Perhaps it's because I believed I was on the side of justice. I'm sorry, Father. At this moment, you saw the White Scar's traitor's eyelids slowly close, and all life signs instantly plummeted. You quickly drove your vibranium power armor forward, passing the slightly stunned Khan, only to discover that fragments of a power weapon had been horizontally embedded deep into both of the White Scar's traitor's hearts from behind his armor. Thump, thump, thump. At this moment, you and the Khan's massive bodies sped like lightning through the immensely wide ship corridors. One by one, the loyal White Scar's veterans, after saluting you by placing their hands on their chests, followed closely behind you without hesitation. Not long after, the roar of bolters and explosions reached your ears. You and the Khan, leading numerous fully armed Astartes, successfully arrived outside the bridge hall, which was being repeatedly attacked by Shiban Khan and the Stormseer Yesuge. Perhaps the arrival of your Primarch reignited the fighting will of all loyal Astartes. Working together, the group quickly broke through the traitors' defenses and rushed into the chaotic bridge hall. Hum, hum, hum. At this moment, you immediately activated your vibranium power armor and stepped forward, with strands of dark shadow power repeatedly blooming and flickering across your massive body. Bolters and energy beams whistled through the air, exploding repeatedly around you, but they caused no effective damage whatsoever. Without hesitation, you raised a massive hand, and countless surging dark shadow power, like a terrifying tide, completely submerged every White Scar's traitor present. And as more of the dark shadow power gradually receded, almost every White Scar's traitor was tightly entangled by strands of dark shadow power, completely unable to move. The next moment, the Khan, holding the White Tiger greatsword and wearing his wildfire armor, stepped into the bridge hall. He slightly nodded his head in your direction, seemingly expressing gratitude. Subsequently, the Khan's gaze, filled with rage, fixed upon the burly body of the instigator of the rebellion, Haxley Khan. Tell me, Haxley Khan, what in the world has possessed you people? The Khan's incredibly low voice slowly echoed deep within the utterly silenced bridge hall. Father, you cannot understand. Everything I have done is for the benefit of the White Scar's Legion. I only hope that you, as our Primarch, can reunite with my Lord Horus. Only then will our White Scars prosper even more. At this moment, Haxley Khan, who was not hysterical despite his defeat, earnestly spoke to the Khan in a deep voice. However, Haxley Khan's words seemed to make the Khan's rage uncontrollable. He instinctively took a few steps forward in his wildfire armor, his cold gaze fixed on the other party as he growled. Haxley, How dare you insult the White Scars warriors who remain loyal to the Imperium and even the Emperor? You have not only betrayed me, your father. You have also betrayed the Imperium and the Emperor. Do you still believe that your actions are correct? The Khan's roar quickly reverberated throughout the entire bridge hall. In fact, it wasn't just you who found the thought process of these White Scars traitors a bit strange. Even the large number of White Scars veterans gathered around were confused by the traitors' actions. Father, perhaps drawing swords against our battle brothers was an irreversible and grave mistake, but we never regret anything we have done. Our people have successfully contacted Horus Warmaster, and the White Scars Legion must choose an absolutely correct stance. This is the future of the White Scars Legion. Huxley Khan's low words gradually silenced the enraged Khan. After a long pause, the expressionless Khan slowly spoke to the other party. My sons, you have all been deceived by Horus. He is not seeking a correct path for humanity or even the Imperium. Behind him stand the Chaos Gods from the depths of the warp. Khan, the Warmaster, he did not. No sooner had the Khan finished speaking than Huxley Khan tried to argue. Enough. At this moment, with a furious roar from the Khan, his entire massive body rushed towards Huxley like lightning. The White Tiger Greatsword, tightly gripped in his massive hand, had already deeply pierced Huxley Khan's chest and abdomen. The next second, the Khan raised his hand and removed the other party's metal helmet. A pair of eyes, filled with endless rage, stared fixedly at Huxley Khan's gradually stiffening and paling face. You fools know nothing of the truth. I once regarded each and every one of you as my sons, cherishing every opportunity I had with you. Is this how you repay me, your father? And the White Scars Legion has always been Chagatai Khan's legion, not Horus's Shadow Wolves. Therefore, apart from me, your Primarch, no one can influence the entire legion's fighting will. Neither Horus nor the Emperor, nor any force in the cold galaxy can. After the Khan let out a deafening roar at Huxley Khan, whose expression was incredibly distorted. The other party's entire burly body was casually thrown heavily onto the metal floor by the Khan. Although the swift withdrawal of the White Tiger Greatsword scattered a lot of congealed blood on the ground, the Khan, who had not damaged any vital organs, did not kill the rebellion's instigator on the spot. Someone, imprison all these traitors for me. From today onwards, your only identity will be that of penitents who have abandoned their Primarch and Legion. You will not receive any support from the Legion, and you will join every dangerous operation against traitors. And only death will wash away all the shame upon you. At this moment, the Khan, who had raised the White Tiger Greatsword several times, seemed to have finally made an important decision. He did not, in his rage and temper, kill all his traitorous sons on the spot, but instead designated those before him as penitents who would atone until death. Khan, if you can't bring yourself to do it, you can let me handle it, you said calmly, gazing at the traitors who were being successfully taken over by a large number of loyal Astartes. Aside from these stubborn instigators, most of my sons stood against you and me due to mistaken ideas and beliefs. Even killing them with my own hands wouldn't change that. I want them to witness Horus and the others' actions with their own eyes. Let them shed their last drop of blood on the battlefield. At this moment, the Khan, who had slightly shaken his head, explained to you the true reason for his leniency. It is very difficult to forcibly correct mistaken ideas, unless all the traitors clearly know they were wrong, otherwise, they will still believe they are dying heroically. You were noncommittal about the Khan's handling of the situation. But the White Scars were, after all, the Khan's sons, and his Astartes Legion. In the cold void, massive vessels that had successfully escaped the rebellion's influence were rejoining the White Scars fleet. However, looking around, many ships were still completely occupied by the traitors. They still wanted to persuade the Primarch to join Horus, leading the White Scars onto what they believed was the correct path. Not long after, once the vast majority of the large ships that had rejoined the White Scars fleet began pursuing the Death Guard fleet that had not yet successfully escaped. You and the Khan personally descended into the ships occupied by the traitors, initiating battle after battle of reclamation. To some extent, you did not change anything because of the Khan's leniency towards his sons. Almost every White Scars traitor who faced you was cut into a rain of blood and flesh by the wildly swinging Azure Dragon glaive. If loyalty is not absolute, then it is absolute disloyalty. In your eyes, betrayal is betrayal, no matter what views or ideals the other party holds. When these traitors chose to raise their bolter and power sword against the Primarch and even their battle brothers, they should have known the consequences. The Khan, who fought alongside you, did not stop any of your killing, he only tried to get more traitors to put down their weapons before you acted. Soon after, the lingering effects of the traitors within the entire Legion fleet were completely cleared by you and the Khan. The tireless Khan also immediately convened a summit meeting for the countless Khans of the White Scars Legion. When the Khan, in the name of Magnus and yourself, revealed more truth about Horus and the warp to those present, even the traitors confined deep within the brig quickly learned that the Horus Warmaster they worshipped and respected no longer existed. Thus, the White Scars Legion, which was on the verge of splitting, quickly united under the efforts of the Khan and you, with countless long-suppressed angers and desires for battle flowing repeatedly within the burly bodies of every White Scars veteran. They yearned for revenge and slaughter, eager to deliver the intimate greetings of bolter and power glaive to those traitors who had abandoned the Emperor and the human empire. You and the Khan immediately formulated the next battle plan. You would utilize the White Scars fleet's superior speed and maneuverability compared to other legions to launch guerrilla warfare against the traitors' supply lines, alleviating immense pressure on the front lines. In the period that followed, the White Scars fleet, fueled by anger and destruction, dealt a heavy blow to the traitors' supply lines. Under your and the Khan's personal leadership, transport ships laden with various war supplies became sacrifices for the White Scars fleet's strategy of fighting to sustain itself. However, this guerrilla warfare could not always be smooth sailing. The gradually realizing traitors would even use some transport ships as bait, leading the White Scars fleet deep into encirclement. As fierce boarding battles continuously unfolded, the number of Astartes in the entire White Scars Legion gradually decreased. A large number of White Scars traitors who became Redeemers were mostly depleted in countless boarding battles, with only a small portion, such as Khan Torgan, successfully surviving. During this period, you also rapidly absorbed and digested the countless psionic knowledge that Magnus's benevolent soul had imbued in you. Your understanding and application of the essence of psychic power are far surpassing your past self. Even in an encirclement and annihilation battle led by the traitor Legion Iron Warriors, in order to save the Khan and the main White Scars force temporarily trapped on an Imperial planet, you had no choice but to unleash terrifying psychic power far beyond imagination, causing the entire planet's surface to fall into continuous cataclysmic upheaval. If it weren't for your remaining clear consciousness forcibly revoking the final destructive measures, the continuously erupting shadow power would likely have completely destroyed the entire planet. Even so, Yasuge, the chief stormseer of the White Scars, clearly told you that the psychic power you now control already far exceeds that of a normal alpha-level psionic. It was at this time, by analyzing a large number of battlefield situations and the traitors' movements, the Khan believed that you should set off for the solar system to support Holy Terra. However, this was not an easy objective to achieve. The outer reaches of the solar system and any void routes that could enter the solar system are currently under the traitors' control, and large-scale warp storms that constantly envelop most star systems are repeatedly blocking all travel and communication. At this moment, you stood in your vibranium power armor before a green glowing virtual star map, with a large amount of intelligence information from within the White Scars flowing freely within your field of vision. Khan, judging from the current star map, all our directions show traces of traitor fleets, which means they are trying to implement a wider range of blockade and encirclement against us. You frowned, your gaze shifting, and you pointed to a cold void on the star map, speaking calmly. But here, around an ancient warp gate named the Gate of Kalim, no defensive forces have been found. I can guarantee you that this is a trap set by the traitors for our fleet. They are trying to drive us into this area. Precisely because of this, we can instead use the traitors' intentions to employ a feint tactic, launching a massive diversionary attack here, but secretly, the true main fleet must go here, an artificial space station hidden behind layers of information. I previously used my uncontrollable precognitive ability to try multiple times, but aside from a mysterious artifact of unknown origin, I didn't gain more useful future visions and information, but my beast instinct also repeatedly tells me that if we want the White Scars fleet to return to Holy Terra, then we must enter it to find something. At this moment, your words had just fallen. The Khan, who had slightly shifted his gaze, continued to ask in your direction, "Little brother, what exactly did you see through your precognitive ability?" You suddenly took a deep breath, your bronze-colored face showing a slightly solemn expression as you spoke in a deep voice to the Khan in front of you. An early test item suspected to be the Golden Throne, a mysterious artifact that can forcibly connect to the webway, the Black Glass Throne. Thank you all for your support. Amidst countless shipwrecks and asteroid fragments, beams of brilliantly shining light spears instantly cut through the cold void, but collided with the void shields of one rapidly moving capital ship after another, creating rippling waves and sparks. Looking out, these capital ships belonging to the White Scars Legion were, under the combined encirclement of the Death Guard fleet and the Emperor's Children fleet, launching a continuous assault towards an ancient warp gate named the Gate of Khalim. In fact, given the White Scars Legion fleet's speed, even some flagships of the traitor legions would find it difficult to close the vast distance between them. However, the White Scars Legion fleet's current mission was to firmly tie down the combined Death Guard and Emperor's Children fleets until their feint attack could no longer be maintained, or until the Primarch's fleet arrived at its destination, after which they could rapidly initiate a series of retreat operations. This was originally a difficult, one-way battle, yet even more White Scars Legion veterans and mortal crew members voluntarily boarded these ships. Rumble. Soon after, with terrifying sounds of heavy power armor twisting and deforming. Large numbers of boarding torpedoes and assault craft from the Emperor's Children, carrying the high-temperature aura of melta lasers, continuously surged deep into the White Scars Legion ships, and rapidly launched the boarding tactics that every Astartes Legion excelled at. Thump thump thump. However, when some key Shui Terminators wearing Terminator power armor and wielding heavy power glaives, along with numerous White Scars Legion veterans carrying heavy firepower weapons, prepared to respond to these former comrades in arms. What gradually appeared in their optical sight was the Emperor's Children, roaring or laughing maniacally, their purple-gold power armor draped in incredibly cruel bloody human skin, or adorned with chaos blasphemous runes. These traitors of the Legion, who had completely fallen with Fulgrim, showed no fear of the incoming dense bolter fire or scorching lasers. Their incredibly agile maneuverability and special noise-emitting weapons caused heavy casualties among many White Scars Legion veterans who were facing the Chaos Astartes for the first time. Thump thump thump. It was at this moment that a burly figure wearing wildfire armor, wielding a power glaive, swiftly moved past everyone, launching incredibly swift and deadly slaughters against these irredeemable Chaos Astartes. He was, of course, not the Primarch, Khan, but the Lord of the Qi Shui, Khan's personal guard, Qin Shah, who had distinguished himself from countless Qi Shui Terminators. He had not only fought and grown with Khan since childhood but also accompanied Khan in the Great Crusade, conquering East and West, and earned countless merits for Khan and the White Scars Legion. Now, the loyal Qin Shah had even volunteered to wear the Primarch's wildfire armor, impersonating the Primarch to attract the entire combined fleet of the traitors. Click click click. At this moment, almost none of these Emperor's Children, who had completely fallen from soul to body, could successfully withstand the fierce charge of the Lord of the Qi Shui Qin Shah. The heavy power glaive, tightly held in his hands, carried speed and skill unimaginable to ordinary Astartes, continuously sweeping past the necks of the Emperor's Children, severing heads that flew high into the air. Boom! Just then, Adolin, one of the Emperor's Children's commanders, the Soul Breaker, brandished a lightning-flashing thunder hammer and launched an even swifter and terrifying charge towards the Lord of the Qi Shui Qin Shah. In an instant, the heavy weapons of both sides, wielded with immense force, collided heavily in the blood and bolter-strewn air, and the resulting impact even caused the surrounding White Scars Legion veterans and Emperor's children to instinctively clear the combat area. In fact, the Lord of the Qi Shui Qin Sha, whose burly body was clad in wildfire armor, was clearly superior to Adolin in both combat experience and skill. Within just a few rapid exchanges, he had deeply embedded the sharp blade of his heavy power glaive into Adolin's tall body. "Ah, I understand now, you are definitely not the true Khan, otherwise I would already be dead." However, as the Lord of the Qi Shui Qin Sha intended to finish off this traitor, Adolin, whose twisted, purplish face showed no sign of pain, suddenly lowered his head forward. A terrifying face, as if growing between his neck and the back of his head, suddenly let out a deafening psychic shriek at the Lord of the Qi Shui Qin Sha, who was now at close range. PFF'd. The Lord of the Qi Shui Qin Sha, who was originally in an invincible position, fell into an extremely brief state of disorientation due to the psychic shriek. The next second, Adolin, swinging his thunder hammer once more, forcibly sent his entire burly body flying, and a large amount of viscous blood continuously spurted out from his shattered metal helmet. And just as Adolin, who had gained the upper hand and showed no mercy, was about to immediately propel his power armor forward to directly eliminate this Astartes impersonating the Primarch. Hum hum hum. As the entire ship's corridor erupted with sudden, terrifying psychic fluctuations. In an instant, a dark shadow teleportation gate that emerged from behind the ranks of the White Scars Legion veterans caused all the Emperor's children present to instinctively halt their heavy advance. At the same time, under the incredibly excited silent gaze of countless White Scars Legion veterans, wisps of dark shadow power gently caught the Lord of the Qi Shui Qin Sha, who was severely wounded. My little Khan, I have completely failed Father's trust. I failed to buy more time for the main force's plan. Qin Sha, whose mind seemed to be in a hazy state, gazed intently at your face and murmured, countless sticky water and blood gushing from his mouth and nose. You casually placed a crystal-clear panacea into his mouth, while reassuring him with a relieved tone. Lord of the Qi Shui Qin Sha, you and the other White Scars Legion offspring have done very well. Khan and I have even found that destination ahead of schedule. Therefore, all White Scars Legion offspring, I, as the Primarch, command you to cover the surviving mortal crew and immediately begin retreating. As for what comes next, leave everything to me. Thank you for your support. Just a moment later, Adolin, Soul Breaker, and one of the commanders of the Emperor's children, along with many Emperor's children who couldn't escape in time, became playthings in your hands. Countless dismembered limbs flew everywhere in the ship's corridors at angles far beyond human imagination. Adolin, who couldn't help but let out more psionic shrieks, didn't even last a few seconds before your terrifying psionic power completely churned him into an incredibly bloody pulp. Immediately after, taking advantage of the brief moment when a large number of White Scars veterans and mortal crew members were evacuating through the Black Shadow portal, your entire massive body instantly arrived in the cold void via Shadow Step. Your skull helmet subtly swayed. A vibranium hand slowly rose, releasing an even more terrifying Black Shadow power towards the traitor combined fleet that was vigorously attacking the White Scars fleet without any hesitation. If anyone could look from the cold void, they would even see a gigantic shadow raven, its size comparable to an ordinary planet, gradually enveloping the top of every traitor ship. Perhaps to countless traitors, this was merely an ambush trap set for the White Scars fleet. But for you now, wasn't it these traitors who had fallen into your encirclement? After all, having integrated and absorbed countless psionic knowledge and even warp secrets, and even a part of Magnus's warp essence, the terrifying psionic power you possess has completely surpassed most alpha-level psionics. Although still not comparable to the Emperor, whose psionic power is as vast as a sea of stars, or even the Tyrant, the super psyker you once encountered. But at least you can see Magnus's red back, and if you work hard, it's not impossible to surpass this king of sorcerers in the future. Rumble. At this moment, the super shadow raven you forcibly condensed launched a horrific storm of destruction against a large number of traitor ships. The void shields that were constantly expanding between countless ships disappeared like rapidly bursting soap bubbles. Immediately after, an incredibly massive shadow claw crushed a Death Guard capital ship into metal debris flying everywhere, and a massive wing that slammed down also caused more traitor ships to collide with each other, then erupting into incredibly dazzling explosive fire. At this moment, you were like an incredibly ruthless warp god, destroying human creations that had lost favor, wantonly annihilating every traitor ship within your field of vision. However, when the number of lost traitor ships approached half, you seemed to hear Mortarian's exasperated low roar and a fleeting, cunning laugh. The next second, your entire consciousness instantly became alert. You were not wary of the heavily damaged Mortarian, but rather suspected that Tzeentch, the trickster, was plotting some scheme. When you realized that more White Scar's ships had successfully disengaged from the battlefield, and most of the sunken ships had also transferred more mortal crew members and Astartes, you quickly dispersed the terrifying psionic power that was attacking the combined fleet without any hesitation, and resummoned a black shadow portal. You successfully returned to the artificial space station that you and the Khan had successfully occupied. Approximately several hundred meters away, among countless apothecary brothers who were rescuing Astartes and mortal casualties, a navigator named Peter Asharius, who had once been entrusted with a great responsibility by the Emperor, was conversing with the grim-faced Khan. "My Lord Khan, do you even know the preciousness of the Black Glass Throne? It is an irreplaceable ancient mysterious creation. And it was an early test device used to experiment with a large amount of Golden Throne technology. Don't glare at me. I also know that the situation on Terra is quite urgent right now, and I wish I could help you go to the solar system, but I can't open the Black Glass Throne for you right now, which means creating an entrance to other planets on the webway." "What? You think I'm one of those damned traitors? Is it that I'm unwilling to help you? I'm simply powerless. Ordinary psychers cannot withstand the terrifying consumption of opening a webway entrance. The entire person would turn to ashes. I'm telling you, Khan, I was a research scholar personally appointed by the Emperor hundreds of years ago. Do you understand the value in that? Don't think that just because you are the Emperor's son, you can do whatever you want to me." At this moment, facing the navigator Peter's aggressive attitude, the Khan, whose entire face was as cold as ice, was unable to offer any rebuttal. The other party was not on the side of the traitors, but rather, each activation of the Black Glass Throne required the psionic power and even the lives of many psychers. And now, the only ones the Khan could sacrifice, besides the librarian units within the White Scar's Legion, were the even more important navigator families and astropaths. Thump thump thump. Just then, you, after pondering for a moment, suddenly drove your vibranium power armor to stand before the Khan and navigator Peter. "What if you let me do it? My psionic power should have no problem activating the Black Glass Throne, right?" You said calmly to the frowning Khan and the instinctively wide-eyed navigator Peter. "Little brother, you are a gene seed primarch. This is non-negotiable. I would rather let all the librarian scions in the Legion sacrifice themselves here than let you die for our White Scars," the Khan said to you resolutely. To some extent, the Khan, who had already lost a friend and a brother, could not imagine the enormous consequences of even you, his little brother, falling in battle. Regardless of how the Emperor and his other brothers would view him, he first couldn't get past his own conscience. But you, having experienced countless deaths in simulated training, had no psychological burden regarding this. You painstakingly explained your certain degree of immortality and descent, among other characteristics, to the unyielding Khan. Ultimately, the Khan, half believing, half doubting, decided to trust your words. However, just as the two of you Primarchs were preparing to sit on the Black Glass Throne and lead the White Scars fleet to await the opening of the webway entrance, respectively, a female navigator named Vera from the Terra Navigator family actually tried to use a large number of vortex bombs to completely destroy the artificial space station where the Black Glass Throne was located. Fortunately, Lord of the Qi Shui Qin Sha, and Chief Storm Seer Yesuge, as well as the only loyal Thousand Sons member of Ada, were patrolling near the Black Glass Throne and immediately detected this massive conspiracy that could have doomed the entire White Scars Legion. Thank you all for your support. Chapter 1050 Iron Horse and Frozen River Enter Dreams, Chagatai Kant 15. At this moment, even you, who had faced countless desperate and terrifying battlefields, couldn't help but feel a surge of anger. Just one step away, the White Scars Legion would have paid an extremely heavy price in casualties during their breakout to completely escape the traitors, encirclement and return to the solar system to support Holy Terra. And the mastermind behind all of this was a mere navigator who had betrayed all your trust. Thump thump thump. Not long after, under the silent gaze of countless tech priests and repair servitors, your massive body rapidly propelled the vibranium power armor, crashing through the artificial space station's starport to reach the crucial location where the Black Glass Throne was stored. You saw at a glance the female navigator, Vera, covered in scars, firmly bound to the metal floor by the Lord of the Qi Shui Qinsha and the Chief Storm Seer Yesuge. At this moment, before you, with your gradually chilling gaze, could step forward to inquire. Aveda, a loyal Thousand Son, holding a golden power scepter in his palm and with a visibly graver expression, immediately drove his power armor, covered in scorch marks, to stand before you. My lord, this fellow's massive conspiracy to blow up the artificial space station, which he had secretly plotted for a long time, was unexpectedly thwarted by us, but because the psychic sorcery we unleashed affected some of the Black Glass Throne's ancient maintenance devices, this ancient creation, once activated, can no longer be stopped. Facing such a dangerous and special situation, I think it's better to let Yesuge and I handle it. You, as a Primarch, don't need to bear such a great risk. However, at this moment, Aveda's words had just fallen. You took a deep breath, gazed at him, and said in a low voice, "Don't worry, the last loyal Thousand Son, the psychic power I possess will surely turn any dangerous situation into safety. Just trust me." The next moment, your entire massive body, propelled by the vibranium power armor, arrived before the female navigator, Vera. Your cold eyes looked down at her pale face, and you asked softly, "Mortal, why did you do this? I and the Khan have never mistreated your navigator family, and you are not one of those fanatical chaos traitors. So, tell me, why did you want to destroy the Black Glass Throne?" "Respected Primarch my lord, my mission has failed, and I know my sins are grave and I cannot escape death, so I can tell you some of the truth. My mission was not to destroy the Black Glass Throne, but to assassinate the navigator Peter, the purpose being to prevent him from truly researching the ancient technology that allows free access to the webway. All of this is closely related to the countless navigator families on Holy Terra. If the Emperor and even the human empire successfully master the power of the webway, then our navigator families will no longer have any use, and only then will our clan prosper forever." At this moment, the female navigator Vera, with an expression devoid of joy or sorrow, explained to you word by word. Your bronzed face twitched slightly with the rise and fall of her words. Finally, you couldn't help but let out a low, cold laugh. "Ha ha, you navigator families truly deserve to die. When the war and rebellion sweeping the entire galaxy are descending everywhere, your navigator families are actually considering your own interests. You'd best pray to the Emperor now. Pray that my future superluminal engine manufacturing plan will fail, otherwise I will kill every last one of your navigator families immediately." Your cold voice slowly echoed in her ears. Without any hesitation, you raised a massive hand, gripped the female navigator Vera's entire head with force, and then easily crushed her skull. PFF'd. You expressionlessly shook your blood-stained hand, your gaze fixed on Qin Sha and Yesuge, who stood nearby, and said, "Time waits for no one. The traitors' combined fleet could track us at any moment, so there's no need to tell the Khan about this in detail for now. Just the few of you need to know. Everyone present, including the tech priests, leave this place together. I am about to activate the Black Glass Throne." You swiftly raised your other vibranium hand and lightly waved it, and countless surging dark shadow power sent everyone present into the White Scars fleet. Once there was no longer any sign of life around. You took a deep breath. You slowly propelled the vibranium power armor, walking towards the empty black glass throne in your field of vision. As soon as your entire massive body sat upon the black glass throne, countless dark shadow power was forcibly extracted continuously from deep within your massive body by the instantly activated ancient device. You resisted this terrifying torment of constant power loss with your Primarch-level resilience and tenacious will. You could even more deeply experience some of the true feelings of the future Emperor, and the torment level of the Black Glass Throne was simply not worth mentioning compared to the Golden Throne. At the same time, your gradually blurring consciousness seemed to perceive the fragmented webway spread throughout the entire galaxy. Countless known and even unknown webway locations were clearly infused deep into your memory, and even the shattered webway within Holy Terra and the secret webway where the Dark Eldar capital Comorig was located were basically all within your sight. At this moment, you, enduring endless pain and torment, instinctively let out a hoarse roar. You forcibly opened a massive webway portal directly to the solar system in front of the poised White Scar's fleet. After you personally watched as one White Scar's ship after another successfully entered the depths of the webway portal. Your massive body, from which the Black Glass Throne was forcibly extracting a large amount of psychic power, began to gradually wither and collapse, eventually turning into wisps of white dust carried away by the wind. And just as your entire consciousness was about to fall into endless darkness, you suddenly vaguely saw Lionel Johnson and Omegan, who were fiercely fighting countless time remnants in the depths of the warp, as well as a large number of fiercely burning Cursed Legion. You let out an incredibly long sigh, as if you had suddenly understood. You once again embarked on the final destination of death. You died. Thank you for your support. The third lung arrives late, the Khan's loyalty. This simulation has ended, time elapsed is unknown. The retainable options for this simulation are as follows. 1. Psychic Arcana, Magnus's Hope, Primarch, incomplete. Note: this is a precious gift from the Wizard King, the Crimson Magnus's last remaining kind soul, to you, his little brother. Note: this not only contains a vast amount of psychic sorcery, casting techniques, and psychic knowledge mastered by Magnus, but also a partial essence of Magnus's warp nature. However, it is incomplete at present. Note: if you wish to master a more complete warp essence, you must travel to Prospero before its burning through simulated experience. If you miss the correct time node, the Magnus who successfully ascended to a demon prince will completely lose the remaining warp essence, and you will be unable to truly inherit his portion of the warp essence. Note: I was wrong, I was truly wrong. I should never have recklessly explored the secrets of the warp from the very beginning. If I hadn't delved into the warp, then I wouldn't have met that generous Tzeentch. If not for Tzeentch's great help, I wouldn't have accidentally destroyed the Emperor's great webway project. Magnus, having just realized the immense trouble he had inadvertently caused, murmured to himself within the resplendent pyramid. 2. Sister of the Golden Throne, the Black Glass Throne, unknown. Note: although the Black Glass Throne was once used to test some ancient technologies applied to the Golden Throne, like the Golden Throne itself, the Emperor and his scientific team were not the true builders, but rather the excavators and discoverers. Note: according to secret records that have vanished into the long expanse of time, the true origin and creators of the Black Glass Throne are almost unknown, but the Emperor once suspected these things were closely related to the Ancient One, a mysterious psychic race from legend. Note: when a large amount of psychic power is injected, the Black Glass Throne can forcibly open a portal into and out of the webway. Although its duration cannot compare to the Golden Throne, it is enough to cause far-reaching changes in the human empire, beyond imagination. The only issues are the fierce resistance from countless navigator families and the massive consumption of psychers. Note: the throne is here, why not ascend to godhood? A pitch-black star, facing off against a cold sun, murmured to itself. 3. The third lung arrives late, the Khan's loyalty, Primarch. Note: this is a Primarch organ recloned from Chagatai Khan's biological cells. To some extent, it is no different from the Primarch's own organs. Note: it seems to have been enhanced and blessed by the Emperor, and re-blessed by the sixth Chaos God, Luo Sha. Note: the third lung, also known as the multi-lung, has the appearance of a grayish tubular organ. Innumerable fresh blood, rich in nutrients and oxygen, flows through this organ into the pulmonary circulation. It allows you to absorb more oxygen from any toxic or oxygen-deprived environment, and can even forcibly close to prevent large amounts of toxic substances from entering the lungs. Even if toxins have already entered the pulmonary circulation, its inherent toxin decomposition, neutralization, and regeneration capabilities will keep you invincible. At the same time, this organ, under the Khan's blessing, has gained a portion of his warp essence, which you need to explore further on your own. Note: before countless Astartes of the White Scars, the Khan, wearing his wildfire armor on his massive body, spoke in a deep voice, "After I leave, you must honor Luo Sha. He is my Primarch brother, and he will be the little Khan of the White Scars Legion. I believe he will treat you, his eagle-like children, as equals, just as I have." Before his words had even faded, the Khan, without any hesitation, led a portion of the battle-hardened White Scars veterans onto hovering motorcycles whose engines were roaring fiercely, and then, without looking back, charged into the depths of the shimmering webway entrance. Note: tick-tock, tick-tock, time waits for no one, young man. The dimensional wall that the Emperor's humanity is struggling to maintain has begun to collapse and be destroyed. The poor Ancient One has already fallen and sacrificed herself. God King Odin has also completely become sustenance for a pair of traitorous children. The cold gazes of the 5 gods of creation are slowly turning towards your native Terra. Tick-tock, tick-tock. A pitch-black star, resembling a black hole, issued an incredibly harsh warning to you from the mysterious and bizarre depths of the high heavens, and even the cold sun, which was facing off against it, slowly emitted a low hum. When Luo Sha, with a slight frown, instantly opened his tightly closed eyes. Across the gleaming metal round table, Lionel Johnson and Omegan, with somewhat solemn expressions, had already awakened before him. Before Luo Sha could ask them about the specifics of the simulated experience, Lionel Johnson and Omegan recounted all of their experiences. It turned out that neither of them had entered any specific timeline. Instead, they had led countless cursed legions and swarms of time remnants in fierce battles. These time remnants, whose appearances, forms, and even weaponry were identical to Luo Sha himself from certain past periods, seemed to be chaos demons belonging to the 6th chaos god. In fact, most of the time remnants had little normal sanity, and did not display much coordination or combat skill when facing any enemy. Only some time remnants with relatively complete bodies and heads possessed 1%, or even 1/10, of Luo Sha's combat power. Among them, Omegan had once encountered a super individual possessing 1/3 of Luo Sha's main body's combat power. This individual seemed to be equivalent to a Chaos Great Demon among Chaos Demons. Apart from that, the problem was that the number of time remnants seen by Lionel Johnson and Omegan seemed excessive. In their combined accounts, they had even inadvertently seen many demons who worshipped the Chaos Gods, as well as many warp creatures, being forced to unite and forcibly drive away these insane and peculiar entities. However, whenever the number of these time remnants was cleared to a certain extent by everyone, even more time remnants would continuously drift in all directions with the warp currents. In other words, barring any unforeseen circumstances, the 6th Chaos God, Luo Sha, was gradually upgrading countless time remnants into a mobile cataclysm in the depths of the high heavens. Thank you for your support. Chapter 1052, The True Essence on the Verge of Awakening and the Wild Wolf's Trail. Deep within the upper compartments of the Calamity Legion's flagship, the Gloriana-class battleship, Iron Fist, Luo Sha, clad in vibranium power armor, stood alone in a vast training ground. Not long ago, the ancient artifact, the Black Glass Throne, which he had successfully extracted, had been escorted by a rubbing hands with excitement readiness to the Hero Tower. Coupled with the alien artifact, Shadow Light, which the latter had been studying for a long time, it might bring Luo Sha some immense benefits far beyond imagination. Even if it couldn't further enhance Luo Sha's or the Calamity Legion's combat strength, It could at least allow them to truly come into contact with the ancient legendary psionic technology of the webway. At this moment, Luo Sha, with his eyes closed, was carefully sensing the newly strengthened third lung within his massive body, as well as the precious gift from Magnus's benevolent soul. Looking around, tendrils of black shadow power, moving without wind, slowly flowed over the subtly glowing surface of the vibranium power armor. From the perspective of current combat strength alone, I seem to have reached a certain limit, especially after gradually absorbing and learning countless psionic knowledge and a large number of psionic mysteries. The terrifying psionic power I once possessed in simulated training seems to be completely transforming into reality. Luo Sha's eyes snapped open, and a deep, abyssal shadow flashed in the depths of his pupils, vanishing in an instant. The next second, streams of psionic flames and psionic lightning, forcibly imitated and transformed by black shadow power, danced back and forth between Luo Sha's vibranium hands. However, I also inadvertently discovered some secrets hidden within my body. That is, from a more macroscopic perspective of reality, I am actually not complete. All of my Primarch brothers, whether traitors or loyalists, were born complete in every aspect, whether physique or warp essence, while I gradually transformed from a powerless mortal into a gene seed Primarch, step by step. Although from a combat perspective, having undergone most of the enhancement surgeries and acquired many Primarch organs, I am already close to complete. However, if I want to pursue the path to godhood in an even more perfect and powerful state, then I probably need to completely finish the remaining enhancement surgeries and merge all awakened warp essences into one, and currently, the warp essences of Magnus, Lorgar, Perturabo, and the most important one, Horus, have yet to be acquired by me. Yes, if my flash of inspiration is correct, then the power intensity in the native universe, no matter how strong, has a clear limit. Even if I can surpass the limits of each Primarch brother, I cannot break through the invisible rules of the native universe. However, the successfully awakened warp essence does not have such restrictions. In fact, as Corvus Corax said, when any Primarch with awakened essence is in the high heavens, the terrifying power they can unleash has already reached the level of a lesser chaos god. At this moment, countless thoughts rapidly swirling in Luo Sha's mind were stirring up a brainstorm. Completely absorbed, he never noticed something. Wisps of black shadow power, like smoke, and more viscous blood seeping from deep within the vibranium power armor, were cyclically flowing around him. At the same time, faint but subtly pulsating colorful illusory planets, like hearts, gradually appeared around his massive body, even making him appear like a rapidly expanding newborn sun. Thump, thump, thump. It was at this moment that a series of sudden, heavy footsteps brought Luo Sha, who was in the midst of warp essence awakening, back to his senses. He had just shifted his newly focused gaze. The gradually brightening colorful illusory planets quickly dimmed and vanished into the cold air. Tisk, could those colorful illusory planets be the warp essences of other Primarchs? Then what is my true warp essence? Is it the unified power that can merge all warp essences into one? Or is it the cold sun that can firmly control all warp essences? But why would I, who successfully ascended to godhood in the future, become an incredibly evil black hole? At this moment, Luo Sha, his brows slowly furrowed, took a deep breath. He fixed his gaze on Omegan, who was walking towards him, deciding to consider more questions later. If he couldn't find the answers himself, he would try to seek help from the instigator of it all, the Emperor. Brother, are you still learning how to control more warp essences? If you have time, I can let you truly experience my warp essence. If you hadn't played a trick last time, you might not have been my opponent. Omegan, with no emotional changes on his solemn face, spoke casually to Luo Sha. His emerald green power armor scales reflected an incredibly cold metallic light under the stark illumination. I'll find a time to properly experience it, let's get to the point, brother. As soon as the other party finished speaking, Luo Sha, instinctively raising his eyebrows, moved his massive body, clad in vibranium power armor, back and forth, shaking his head towards Omegan. Omegan, nodding slightly, did not hesitate further. He said, "Then I await your good news. Currently, there are a few matters that require your instruction. The first, and in my opinion more important, is news from the native universe. Approximately 10 void days ago, Wild Wolf Luo Sha and a heroic team called the Guardians of the Galaxy were ambushed by Thanos' Black Order. Currently, Wild Wolf Luo Sha and the 5 Infinity Stones are missing, their whereabouts and condition unknown. By the time Fulgrim, our Primarch brother and host of the Phoenix Force, personally arrived at the barren planet called Vormir, he discovered that the Soul Stone on it had already been successfully taken by Wild Wolf Luo Sha. In other words, a human-shaped ticking time bomb, controlling 6 Infinity Stones and possessing the power of creation and destruction, was accidentally lost by us. Omegan, although Wild Wolf Luo Sha and I are nominally the main body and a clone, in some sense, we are actually one person. I believe Wild Wolf Luo Sha must have encountered some difficult situation that forced him to resort to disappearing. I even suspect that it wasn't the Black Order who ambushed him, but Thanos himself. Moreover, those 6 Infinity Stones should not have successfully merged, otherwise he would surely have gained powerful enough strength to protect himself. We are currently spread too thin. Have Iron Man David inform Sai-Fu Luo Sha, who is on native Terra. If he has already found the legendary sprite power that devours all things in the universe, then let him go support Wild Wolf Luo Sha. Thank you for your support. Beyond the Gods, the Mad Titan. Chi Chi Chi. On a barren planet in the native universe. A spatial portal, emitting a radiant blue energy glow, suddenly appeared above the shimmering ocean. The next second, a tall figure, whose power armor's every inch of thick vibranium outer shell was covered in terrifying cracks, plunged headfirst into the deep, salty seawater in a rather disheveled manner. Immediately after, Wild Wolf Luo Sha, with crimson blood continuously overflowing from his nose and mouth, violently thrust his head above the sea surface, panting intensely. Once his breathing and even his heartbeat gradually stabilized, a giant hand, wearing a tattered infinity gauntlet, clenched into a fist amidst the countless seawater. Buzz buzz buzz. In an instant, a large amount of red reality stone energy light flashed across the surging sea surface. Looking out, a polar island, about several kilometers in circumference, appeared out of nowhere beneath Wild Wolf Luo Sha's tall body. It completely separated the exhausted opponent from the countless salty seawater. Not long after, when Wild Wolf Luo Sha, with his eyes still tightly closed, regained immense vitality through the panacea he carried and the Primaris Astartes Belisarius furnace. He slowly supported his heavily scarred vibranium power armor and sat up. His cold eyes, which seemed devoid of any emotion, stared gloomily at the boundless ocean surrounding the polar island. In fact, Wild Wolf Luo Sha was indeed fleeing for his life. Not long ago, when Wild Wolf Luo Sha arrived at planet Vormir with the Guardians of the Galaxy, with whom his relationship had grown increasingly close. He thought it was just a simple special operation to acquire the Soul Stone. Especially after Wild Wolf Luo Sha had successfully destroyed the Kree Empire's home planet with a Power Stone. He believed that even if Thanos descended, he, who already controlled 5 Infinity Stones, would have nothing to fear. However, first, the demanding conditions for acquiring the Soul Stone caused some disputes and disagreements between him and Rocket Raccoon and Star-Lord of the Guardians of the Galaxy. According to Wild Wolf Luo Sha's idea, he could use the Space Stone to teleport a pair of twin Astartes or Astra Militarum from native Terra to this place. Whether for the Human Federation or the Empire, these self-sacrificing Astartes or Astra Militarum should meet the specific conditions for obtaining the Soul Stone. But as soon as he spoke, whether it was Rocket Raccoon and Treant Groot, or the seemingly foolish Drax and Star-Lord, they all unanimously expressed intense protest against Wild Wolf Luo Sha's approach. Among them, only Gamora, who was still preoccupied with her thoughts, strongly agreed with Wild Wolf Luo Sha's method. And in these past few days, Wild Wolf Luo Sha, who had almost become friends with the Guardians of the Galaxy, could not use the Mind Stone to erase everyone's memories on the spot. But just as everyone was discussing solutions animatedly, an ambush from the Black Order suddenly descended. Even though these capable subordinates of Thanos were no match for Wild Wolf Luo Sha, their arrival symbolized one thing. That is, the Mad Titan Thanos already knew the true whereabouts of the Soul Stone. In other words, Wild Wolf Luo Sha and his companions only had this one chance to obtain the Soul Stone. Otherwise, once Thanos descended, the entire planet Vormir, along with the Soul Stone that had not yet manifested, would likely turn into cosmic dust scattered in the depths of the cold void. In a flash, Star-Lord, who had been hesitating, made a truly heroic act. He voluntarily sacrificed himself to become the Soul Stone's offering. And at the very moment the last Infinity Stone, the Soul Stone, successfully manifested. Thanos, whose combat power far surpassed his past self, also descended with a roar upon Vormir. HMPH. At this moment, Wild Wolf Luo Sha, seemingly unwilling to recall that tragic battle, could not help but let out a cold snort filled with anger and pain. His few friends, Rocket Raccoon and Treant Groot, were instantly annihilated by Thanos into countless non-existent material atoms. Drax was also cut into countless pieces of flesh and blood by Thanos' pure white power to buy time for him and Gamora. Even when Gamora sacrificed herself to successfully pass the Soul Stone to Wild Wolf Luo Sha. Wild Wolf Luo Sha, with 6 Infinity Stones in hand, thought he would be the first super strong individual to kill Thanos, even before the Primarch. However, Wild Wolf Luo Sha eventually realized he was wrong. Since Thanos and the gods of creation had been allowing them to collect the Infinity Stones, it must be because they were confident about it. On one hand, when the 6 Infinity Stones were successfully gathered, the wielder of the Infinity Gauntlet would gain extremely powerful destructive force. However, the pressure and rebound aftershocks from using the Infinity Stones would also make it increasingly difficult for the wielder to bear. At least for now, Wild Wolf Luo Sha's tough physique, which had received countless blessings from Korn, was unable to withstand the side effects of long-term use of the 6 Infinity Stones. On the other hand, the Mad Titan, who had successfully mastered the fundamental power of several cosmic cubes, obtained the heart of the universe, and even received unlimited blessings and enhancements from the 5 great gods of creation, had already become a terrifying existence that transcended mortality. The current Thanos claims he has become a transcendent god in legends, a god of gods destined to transcend the 5 great gods of creation in the future. At this moment, Wild Wolf Luo Sha, unable to help but raise a thick arm, stared intently at the rough surface of the Infinity Gauntlet, which was covered in countless melted marks, and muttered. I desperately unleashed the destructive power of the 6 Infinity Stones combined into one, and after a snap, I failed to kill the current Thanos. Russ above, what kind of terrifying monster have the gods of creation of the native universe created? I must find a way to notify the Primarch as soon as possible, otherwise not only will all the territories and forces owned by the native universe not be preserved, but once the 5 great gods of creation launch another terrifying invasion against the Warhammer universe, who can withstand the Mad Titan in its transcendent god state in the reality universe? Thinking of this, Wild Wolf Luo Sha, whose injuries had completely healed, immediately drove his extremely damaged vibranium power armor to stand up from the polar island. However, when he subconsciously tightened his grip on the scarred Infinity Gauntlet, intending to instantly open a spatial portal to native Terra, just outside the cold void of this barren planet, a pure white palm, looking incredibly massive, even describable as covering the sky, enveloped with a terrifying power that could destroy the world, completely shattered the entire planet into countless cosmic dust. Boom boom boom. Thank you all for your support. Chapter 1054, Crow Prince and the Reborn 8th Legion. Between the cold void of Imperium Nihilus, a strike cruiser, heavily armored and scarred, was fleeing in a panic. And on the flight path not far behind it, an Omen Ark, looking more like a derelict space hulk, was in hot pursuit. Almost simultaneously, a massive fleet belonging to the Calamity Legion swiftly appeared directly in front of the strike cruiser, and surrounded both it and the pursuing Omen Ark in one fell swoop. Buzz buzz buzz. In an instant, ancient assault boats and boarding torpedoes, carrying countless Astartes, immediately launched boarding actions against the trapped vessels. Beams of brilliant light spears and space torpedoes also instantly crossed the cold void, continuously bombarding the thick void shield rapidly erected by the Omen Arc. Boom! Just then, a terrifying psychic giant hand, far exceeding the size of a capital ship, suddenly emerged from within the Legion's flagship, the Steel Fist, Gang Tai Ji Quan. This psychic giant hand, formed by countless dark shadow power, carried an incredibly astonishing and terrifying might, tearing the Omen Arc, located at the center of the space battlefield, into a mass of shattered space debris. Precisely because of this, the Astartes who were engaged in boarding actions undoubtedly proceeded more smoothly. They took only a very short time to clear out the Chaos Demon and Chaos Cultist still alive on the Omen Arc's wreckage, and at the same time, successfully captured the strike cruiser that offered no resistance. However, to Luo Sha, who had effortlessly ended a space naval battle, it was a slight surprise. The children of the Calamity Legion found a legendary figure, well known to the Astartes, inside this strike cruiser of unknown origin. Thump thump thump. Not long after, within the forge hall of the Queen of Glory battleship. Under the dim lighting, two massive Raven Guard super soldiers forcibly brought a disheveled person, whose sturdy body was clad in a tattered, ancient power armor, and whose black hair, streaked with white, fell down his back, into the Primarch's field of vision. As Luo Sha narrowed his eyes slightly and looked down, a fleeting smile involuntarily appeared at the corner of his mouth. Heh heh. Long time no see, Crow Prince Sevatar. At this moment, as Luo Sha's words fell, this Sevatar, known as the Crow Prince, slowly raised his incredibly pale, gaunt face. He stared intently at the high and mighty Luo Sha with a pair of dark eyes that seemed to contain endless vicissitudes, and said word by word. I haven't heard that name in a long time, and I haven't been involved with the Midnight Lords in a long time, my Lord Primarch. Luo Sha, hearing his words, shook his head slightly. He said with an incredibly indifferent tone, "Do you know, I once had the Raven Guard intelligence network search everywhere for your whereabouts, but the countless reports they sent back indicated that you might have fallen during the Great Crusade era. 10,000 years later, the only thing left is a Midnight Lords warband called the Sons of the Crow, who are said to currently follow the Great Raiders Abaddon in various military operations against the Empire. Sevatar, are you interested in telling me about your long life experiences over these 10,000 years? I am indeed very curious about it." At this point, Luo Sha not only raised his hand to have the Super Raven Guard retreat from the Forge Hall. He even casually conjured a shadowy psychic chair from countless dark shadow power behind Sevatar's sturdy body. Sevatar, who now had a clearer understanding of the human empire and even chaos, did not hesitate. He moved his tattered power armor and sat on the psychic chair. My Lord Primarch, your fighting strength seems to be growing stronger and stronger. Even I, hiding on a remote world, have heard of your illustrious reputation many times. My life experience is far less complicated than you imagine. After I successfully became a wanderer, I merely chose an extremely remote planet to replicate the legendary story of our Gene Father, attempting to establish a righteous utopia without sin. It is precisely because of this that I have experienced life as a leader of countless mortals, and also as a rebel army. I once led countless mortals to resist the Chaos Astartes who tried to invade the local area, and I also plundered passing rogue trader for living supplies. Originally, I thought this uneventful life would continue until I died, but when that Omen Arc descended upon that remote planet, I belatedly realized that without the sacrifice and death of my battle brothers, and without the strong assistance from the Legion, I was actually nothing and powerless. I am not you incredibly powerful Gene Seed Primarch after all. I am not even a 10,000th of our Gene Father. I could only watch as the mortal descendants who had followed me for countless years one by one became bloody sacrifices for the Chaos Cultist. The magnificent city we built with our own hands was reduced to a sea of fire. If you ask me what I learned from this, I can tell you that I once made a wrong decision because I was disheartened by all war, Because I ultimately found that as long as the damned chaos existed for one more day, then my righteous utopia with no sin in my heart would never be realized. At this moment, Luo Sha, who had initially maintained a light-hearted posture, slowly became solemn. He gazed at Crow Prince Sevatar below with an incredibly sincere expression, and said in a deep voice, "Sevatar, what if I could give you a specific target for a thorough revenge? A Battle Brothers mission that would allow you to return to the human empire. Would you be willing to become my child?" Luo Sha's words had not yet fallen. Sevatar, after a moment of thoughtful contemplation, slowly moved his incredibly tattered power armor and knelt on the metal floor. Immediately after, he once again raised his pale, gaunt face, and spoke with a slightly mad, even neurotic, tragic smile. "Crow Prince Sevatar greets my Gene Father, my Lord Primarch Luo Sha. I need Astartes veterans, many Astartes veterans. I want to regather those Midnight Lords who are still willing to follow me. I want to rebuild the entire 8th Legion. I want to make the Chaos Lord behind the Omen Arc pay an incredibly painful price." And when Sevatar's words quickly reached Luo Sha's ears, he immediately activated his vibranium power armor and stood up. His eyes, filled with joy, looked down at the Astartes humanoid shell before him, whose remaining life would be consumed by sin and revenge, and said in a deep voice, "My child, then you have truly found the right person. Welcome to the Calamity Legion, my Crow Prince. Thank you all for your support." The Siege of Fortress Monastery. When Crow Prince Sevatar also became Luo Sha's offspring. As the Primarch's command was swiftly issued, warp gates leading directly to native Terra rapidly opened within the flagship. The next moment, one after another, fully formed companies of Primaris Midnight Lords arrived on the flagship. This was not Luo Sha making some early judgments using his psychic precognition. Rather, ever since the Great Heresy ended, the vast majority of Midnight Lords who had not fallen to chaos gradually became hard currency for some small and medium-sized Astartes battle groups and even chaos warbands due to the extreme purity of their gene seed. Therefore, Luo Sha had successfully accumulated quite a few Midnight Lords' gene seeds as spoils of war. Furthermore, because Midnight Wanderer Conrad Kurz had been dead for tens of thousands of years, there were no longer any concerns about chaos corruption when creating more Midnight Lords on native Terra. Soon after, what appeared before Crow Prince Sevatar first was a company of Primaris Midnight Lords numbering 8,000. And even the current Sevatar had no choice but to be completely convinced by Luo Sha, and naturally became the company captain of the Midnight Lords. At the same time, Sevatar, whose power armor and mental state were almost completely renewed, also issued a call to countless scattered Midnight Lords as the Crow Prince. As long as these Midnight Lords veterans were still willing to obey his orders and had not completely fallen to chaos, then all past sins and punishments could be completely absolved by my Lord the Primarch. However, when Omegan and Lionel Johnson congratulated Luo Sha on successfully expanding his Calamity Legion once again, a psychic distress call, which arrived early due to the incredibly chaotic time flow of Imperium Nihilus, put everyone back into a state of readiness. According to the specific intelligence on the psychic distress call, the Chaos Demigod Luo Sha was eager to hunt. The Lord of the Soul Forge, the creator of the Omen Arc, Vashtor, was launching a fierce siege on the Dark Angel's Fortress Monastery. And at this very moment, this war had not yet even begun in the real universe. Imperium Nihilus. In a segment of Imperial territory successfully reclaimed by Lionel Johnson, a large fleet belonging to the Dark Angels battle group was guarding the incredibly massive Fortress Monastery, slowly proceeding along its designated patrol route. Since Lionel Johnson led a portion of the Dark Angels and Absolvers away from Imperium Nihilus to support Luo Sha, although the speed at which they continued to reclaim Imperial territory undoubtedly slowed down significantly. Thanks to the strong support of countless human worlds that had returned to the Imperium, a large number of quickly manufactured capital ships and well-trained mortal crews were forming a new fleet to continuously maintain Imperial territory. And because Lionel Johnson had clearly issued the command to expand the number of Astartes The Dark Angels and Absolvers also began the task of selecting a large number of Astartes' new recruits. However, the only problem was that although the current Dark Angels and Absolvers were nominally one legion, in their daily affairs and combat methods, they were more like two completely different legion factions. Even in the extraction and use of gene seed, they had no interaction whatsoever. At this moment, deep within the fortress monastery, the Dark Angels Monastery, a group of mortals who had just completed the new recruit selection ceremony were being led by Dark Angels into different rooms. At the same time, Grand Master Azrael of the Dark Angels slowly said to Ezekiel, who was projecting a virtual image, "Ezekiel, the number of gene seeds we have cultivated may be insufficient. Can you provide some assistance on your end?" As soon as he finished speaking, Chief Librarian Ezekiel seemed to shake his head slightly. He said to Azrael with a bitter smile, "My Lord Azrael, I can only say I will try my best, but the tech priests who came with my Lord Cypher are clearly more closely related to the Absolvers, and they may not agree to our request. After all, just supplying the Absolvers' gene seeds and daily consumption has consumed a lot of resources." At this moment, Azrael, hearing Ezekiel's report, fell into temporary silence. After a long while, he subconsciously sighed and continued, "Ezekiel, no matter what, we Dark Angels cannot have any disputes or friction with the Absolvers. I do not wish for Father to return again and find that we two sides have never merged, even if Father is actually well aware of this, but we Dark Angels ultimately owe the Absolvers an explanation. Don't worry about the gene seed matter for now, I will find a way." Subsequently, Azrael exchanged some thoughts with Ezekiel regarding the management of the territory reclaimed by Lionel Johnson, and then hastily ended the remote communication. Thump thump thump. However, at this moment, a series of loud, heavy footsteps rapidly reached Azrael's ears. Immediately after, a Dark Angel with an incredibly serious expression, driving his power armor, rushed to the Grand Master's front. "My Lord Azrael, our large ship-borne augur has unexpectedly discovered traces of a large number of Chaos ships. There are even quite a few Omen arcs that we have encountered before. We speculate that these damned Chaos traders are attempting to encircle our entire fleet and the fortress monastery." As soon as the other party finished speaking, the Dark Angel's Grand Master, whose facial expression remained unchanged, immediately issued a series of commands. Immediately notify the Absolvers and every patrol fleet to increase their defenses against the local territory to prevent sneak attacks from Chaos. Additionally, have all the sons of the Dark Angels prepare for battle. If necessary, also release those Inner Circle veterans who are under penance from the Fortress Monastery dungeons. We need their combat strength. At this moment, just as Azrael was rapidly mobilizing a large number of Dark Angels, between the cold void, countless Chaos ships enveloped in a warp storm, as well as several more striking and massive Omen arcs, swiftly cut off all retreat routes for the Dark Angels fleet. In an instant, incredibly brilliant scorching lance beams and immensely powerful space torpedoes erupted like a raging storm, engaging in fierce mutual fire between the two fleets. Looking out, above the countless roaring explosions and the back and forth trembling heavy void shields, deep within the warp storms that layered like ocean waves, surging endlessly, a colossal and very illusory Chaos shadow seemed to be emitting a silent, low, cold laugh. Thank you for your support. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.